Story 1.
My aunt spent years destroying people's reputations over the smallest things: a boyfriend, a handheld, a rumor she invented, and the whole family just let her, because she positioned herself as the moral backbone of our household. Turns out that backbone was rotted through. She'd been sleeping with another man for 3 years while preaching purity to teenagers. So here's what happened. My aunt stole private photos off my phone and blasted them to our entire family at 5 in the morning. She humiliated me, she humiliated my 14-year-old cousin, she made it her life's mission to police everyone's secrets. Then my boyfriend caught her making out with a stranger at his job, and I made sure the whole family saw those photos too at the worst possible moment for her. I'm 17. My aunt is Mira, mid-40s, self-appointed family judge. My mom is Sunita, the kind of person who keeps the peace even when it costs her daughter everything. My dad is Rajesh, quiet until you push him. My boyfriend Arjun, 18, shy, works security at a museum. My cousin Leo, 14, another one of Mira's victims. And then there's Priya, Mira's own daughter, 22, Oxford graduate, the golden child, whose graduation party became the stage for everything to fall apart. It started at my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary party. The whole extended family was there, 40-something people, crammed into my grandparents' house, gold decorations everywhere, the smell of biryani thick in every room. Mira had organized the whole thing naturally. She loved events. Not because she cared about celebrating anyone, but because gatherings gave her an audience. I'd been dating Arjun for about 4 months by then. We were careful. He was shy to the point where holding my hand in public made his ears turn red, and I knew times what my family was like, so we kept things quiet. But I was 17 and stupid enough to keep photos on my phone. Nothing explicit. Us at a cafe. His arm around my waist at a park. One where he kissed my forehead and my eyes were closed and I looked genuinely happy. That was the most damning one, apparently. During the party, I left my phone charging in the guest bedroom. Unlocked. I know. I times know. Asterisk. Mira must have seen me texting earlier because she went looking. She told everyone later she'd gone to the bedroom for her reading glasses. But she spent 11 minutes in that room. I checked the photo transfer timestamps afterwards, scrolling through my gallery, selecting 7 photos and airdropping them to her own phone. Then she walked back out, refilled her chai, and laughed at someone's joke like she hadn't just loaded a gun. She waited until 5:07 a.m. the next morning. Maximum impact. Everyone's phone buzzing on their nightstand, the notification sound cutting through sleep. She dumped all 7 photos into our family WhatsApp group. 63 members with a single message times. Sunita, do you know what your daughter has been doing? This is what happens when parents don't pay attention. Asterisk. My mother's scream woke me up. I didn't even get to read the messages first. She was already in my doorway, phone in her fist arm, cocked back. The phone hit my cheekbone before I understood what was happening. Not the throw itself, the cracked times of the screen against bone, the hot sting that bloomed across the left side of my face. Who is this boy, she kept saying. Who times this boy? I couldn't speak. I was sitting up in bed with my hand on my cheek, watching my mother pace and cry and pace. And all I could think was times Mira did this. Mira was in that room. Asterisk. My dad came in 20 minutes later. He'd read the group chat. He looked at my face, already swelling, and then at my mom, and something shifted behind his eyes. He didn't yell. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, Sunita, enough. Just that. Quiet. Final. The next 3 weeks were the worst of my life. My mother didn't speak to me. Not silence as punishment, silence as something broken. She'd set my plate at dinner and walk away. Arjun texted me, constantly panicking, apologizing for things that weren't his fault. He stopped coming anywhere near our neighborhood. At school, people somehow knew. I don't know who in the family group chat had a kid at my school, but someone talked. A girl in my chemistry class asked me if the photos were the spicy kind, and I locked myself in a bathroom stall for the entire lunch period. I tried calling Mira once. I wanted to hear her explain it. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, and said, Beta, I did it because I care about you. Your parents needed to know. I hung up. Tried again the next day, thinking maybe I'd say something devastating, something that would make her feel what I felt. But what do you say to someone who genuinely believes they're saving you? I eventually gave up. My mom also distanced herself from Mira. She ignored her calls even when Mira visited our house uninvited. My dad gave her the cold shoulder, and my mom tried to keep the meeting short by saying she was busy. What about me? I didn't even greet her. Mira got the hint that we no longer wanted her in our lives. She even tried to confront my mom about the incident and said she didn't mean to humiliate us. My mom said that we had moved on from that incident, and so should she. She never brought up that topic again. She also stopped meddling in our business because my mom ignored her. If humiliating me was not enough, she went after my cousin Leo. Leo was 14, and she saw him walking with a girl holding hands. She clicked his pictures and showed them to his parents. Not privately. At a family lunch. She pulled Leo's dad aside loud enough for the table to hear and said, Your son is getting very friendly with girls. The girl looked 13. Asterisk. 13. Asterisk. She said it like Leo was a predator. He was a kid holding a classmate's hand. Leo's parents grounded him for a month. The girl's family found out. Her older brother confronted Leo outside school. Leo stopped talking at family gatherings entirely, just sat in corners, headphones on, eyes down. I watched this happen and something calcified inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. The understanding that Mira would never stop. That she fed on this. That the only thing that would ever shut her down was a taste of her own medicine. I didn't go looking for it. I want to be clear about that. I joined a dance class. I tried to move on. Arjun and I slowly rebuilt things quieter than before. He'd started a part-time security job at the city museum, mostly watching cameras and checking bags. Boring work. He liked it. Then one Tuesday night, he called me. His voice was strange, tight, almost breathless. "You need to come to the museum," he said. "Right now. Bring a USB drive." What? Why? Just come. It's about your aunt. I drove to the museum on my learner's permit with a USB drive in my pocket and my heart somewhere near my throat. Arjun was waiting at the staff entrance, still in his uniform. He didn't say anything, just took my hand and led me to the security office, a cramped room with 6 monitors, a desk covered in sign-in sheets, and the stale smell of instant coffee. He pointed at the screen. Third camera. The Mughal Miniatures Gallery far corner behind a temporary partition where they stored extra display cases. Mira, my Aunt Mira, pressed against a man I had never seen in my life. His hands were in her hair. Her back was against the wall. They were kissing like teenagers who thought no one was watching. I sat down in the security chair and stared. "I noticed them about 40 minutes ago," Arjun said quietly. "They came in separately, met in that corner." I thought I was wrong at first. I zoomed in. It's her. It was her. The same gold bangles she never took off. The same burgundy shawl she wore to every outing. The same woman who had airdropped my photos at 5:07 a.m. to teach my mother a lesson about parenting. "Can you save this footage?" Arjun hesitated. "I already did." And he pulled out his own phone. 3 photos. Close-ups he'd taken of the monitor with timestamps visible. Clear enough to see her face. Clear enough to see his... I copied everything to the USB drive. My hands were steady. That surprised me. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I was holding a grenade with the pin already out. I sat on those files for 6 weeks. Not because I was being strategic. Because I was terrified. Every time I plugged in the USB drive and looked at the screenshots, my stomach turned. This wasn't a boy holding a girl's hand at a park. This was a married woman with a daughter, and I was 17, and the weight of what I could do pressed against my ribs like a stone. But then the invitation arrived. Mira was throwing a party, a grand celebration for Priya's acceptance to Oxford's graduate program. Not just family. Neighbors, family, friends, colleagues. She'd rented a venue. There would be a stage, speeches, a slideshow of Priya's achievements that Mira had curated herself. My mother showed me the invitation inside. We should go. For Priya's sake. I agreed. For different reasons. The night before the party, I printed the photos on glossy paper at a print shop 2 neighborhoods away. Paid cash. Selected the 4 clearest images, face visible, timestamp visible, his hand on her waist, her laughing into his neck. I slid them into a white envelope, placed the envelope inside a gift box, wrapped it in gold paper with a ribbon, and wrote on the tag times to Mira Auntie with love from the family, asterisk. I hired a courier service. Time delivery 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes into the party, right when the speeches would begin. The venue was beautiful. Mira had outdone herself. White lilies on every table, a banner that read Times Our Pride Times in gold letters. She moved through the crowd in a silk sari, accepting compliments, touching people's arms, glowing. I sat at our family's table with my parents and watched. At 7:32 p.m., a courier walked in and handed the box to the event coordinator who brought it directly to Mira on stage. She was mid-speech, something about how discipline and strong values produce exceptional children. The coordinator whispered in her ear. She smiled, held up the box to the audience. "Even surprise gifts tonight. Let's see who loves us this much." She pulled the ribbon, lifted the lid, took out the envelope. I watched her face. The smile didn't drop immediately. It froze first, calcified like something dying in real time. Her eyes moved across the first photo, then the second. Her fingers went white around the edges of the paper. The room was still waiting for her to share. Someone called out, "What is it, Mira?" She laughed. This high, fractured sound that convinced no one. Just some silly... Priya walked up to the stage. She took the photos from her mother's hands, looked at them for 3 seconds. Then looked at Mira with an expression I will never forget, not shock, not anger, but times recognition, asterisk. I knew it, Priya said, not loud, but the microphone was on. 60 people heard her. The room went silent in that specific way that only happens when everyone understands at once. Mira grabbed for the photos. Priya stepped back. Mira's husband stood up from the front table, confusion collapsing into something worse. We left. My dad's hand was on my shoulder guiding me out. He didn't speak until we were in the car. Did you do this? I said nothing. I'm not asking again later. Did you do this? I don't know what was in that box. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. He knew. He didn't push. The aftermath was slower and heavier than I expected. Priya didn't wait for the family to process. She hired a private investigator within the week. The PI confirmed what the photos suggested. Mira had been seeing the man for 3 years. Asterisk. 3 years? Asterisk. The entire duration of her moral crusade against me, against Leo, against anyone whose private life she could crack open for public consumption. Priya moved out of her mother's house. She told her father everything the PI found. She told him calmly, clearly, the way someone speaks when they've been rehearsing the truth in their head for longer than anyone realized. Mira showed up at our house on a Thursday evening. I was in my room, but I heard everything through the wall. She was crying, not the performative kind. Raw, ugly, gasping sobs. I was lonely, Sunita. You don't understand. He made me feel like I existed. My mother said nothing for a long time. Then, you should be telling this to your husband. He's giving me one chance. One. But Priya won't speak to me. My own daughter, Mira. You did this to yourself. More crying. Then so quiet I almost missed at points. That's what this is. I spent years exposing everyone else, and her voice broke. It came from me. My mother made her tea. Because that's who my mother is. My dad found me in my room afterward. He sat on the edge of my bed, same spot as the morning my mother threw her phone at my face. If you were involved, he said slowly, you need to understand something. Their marriage might not survive. Priya might never forgive her mother. That's not just revenge. That's people's lives. My throat tightened. She did it to me first. I know. He put his hand on my head. That's why I'm not angry. But I need you to sit with this. Really, sit with it. I did. I have. Some nights I feel vindicated. Some nights I feel sick. Most nights I feel both at the same time. And I'm learning that this is what it actually means to get what you wanted. The understanding that justice and revenge share a border so thin you can't always tell which side you're standing on. Mira doesn't come to family gatherings anymore. Leo started talking again. Arjun still works at the museum. Priya texts me, sometimes short messages, no context, just checking in. We never discuss what happened. We don't need to. I'm 18 now. I know things about consequences that most people don't learn until they're much older. I wish I didn't.
Story 2.
My wife's brother moved in with us 3 months ago. Except he wasn't her brother, and he wasn't gay. And everything I thought I knew about the woman I married was a lie she'd been building since before our first date. So here's the short version. My wife convinced me to take in her supposedly disowned brother who was fresh out of rehab. Turns out he was actually her drug addict boyfriend she never broke up with, and she fabricated an entire family backstory, conservative parents, a painful estrangement, all of it just to keep this man close while married to me. I'm 32 male. My wife is Renee, 28, and genuinely one of the sharpest people I've ever met, which makes all of this worse. The man she moved into our home is Marco, 27, and her parents, Gerald and Diane, are the warm, lovely people Renee told me she'd been disowned by. They hadn't disowned anyone. They didn't even know Marco existed. Let me back up to where this started because the lie didn't begin with Marco moving in. It began on our second date. Renee told me about her family over cheap pasta at a place that doesn't exist anymore. She said her parents were deeply conservative, the kind who monitored her phone until she was 20, who refused to let her study out of state, who saw any deviation from their plan as betrayal. She said she'd clawed her way out, moved cities, cut contact, built herself from nothing. I remember sitting across from her thinking, times this woman is extraordinary. Asterisk. She told me her younger brother had come out as gay and her parents had disowned him completely. Changed the locks, removed his photos. She said she tried to intervene and they'd cut her off too. She cried telling me this. Real tears, or what I believed were real tears. Her voice cracked in the right places. Her hands shook holding her wine glass. I fell in love with her courage before I fell in love with her. We married 14 months later. Her family didn't attend the wedding. I never questioned it. Why would I? The story was airtight. She had a stepbrother named Ryan from Gerald's first marriage, and she'd mentioned him exactly twice in passing enough to establish he existed, never enough for me to dig. I realize now she rationed every detail like someone managing inventory. Then 3 months ago, she told me her brother had finally gone to rehab. She said he'd reached out. She said he had nowhere to go. She asked if we could take him in temporarily, just until he got stable. His name was Marco. I said yes because I loved her, and because I thought I was helping someone she loved. Marco arrived with a duffel bag and the kind of exhaustion that made him look 10 years older than 27. He was polite, quiet, grateful. He called me man a lot. He slept on our pull-out couch and did the dishes without being asked. But things didn't sit right almost immediately. The first thing was the name. Renee's last name before marriage was Bellamy. Her parents were the Bellamys. Marco's last name, which I saw on a piece of mail that arrived for him in our mailbox the second week, was Reyes. I asked Renee about it casually. She said he'd legally changed it after the disownment wanted nothing to do with the family name. I nodded. Filed it away. The second thing was the whispering. They whispered constantly. In the kitchen when I was in the living room. On the balcony when I was showering. Once I came home early and they were sitting on the couch with a gap between them that looked recently manufactured, like two magnets pulled apart by a third hand. Marco stood up too fast. Renee smiled too wide. The third thing was that Marco never talked about the family. Not once. A man supposedly disowned by his parents freshly sober living in his sister's apartment, and he never mentioned them. Never said their names. Never expressed anger or grief or anything at all about the people who'd supposedly destroyed his life. I posted about it online. Anonymous, vague, just the broad strokes, wife's brother living with us, different surname, weird energy, constant private conversations. The responses split into two camps. Half said I was paranoid. The other half sent me links to threads I wish I'd never read. Wives who'd moved lovers into the family home disguised as cousins, brothers, old college friends. The playbook was almost standardized. Fabricate a sympathetic backstory. Exploit the husband's empathy. Install the other man under his roof. I read those threads for 4 hours. My hands were steady the entire time. Something in me had already known. I started building my case quietly. I asked Marco if he'd be willing to put together a resume so I could help him find work. He agreed. The resume listed his education, his work history, his full legal name, Marco Antonio Reyes. No mention of Bellamy. No name change documentation. The timeline of his employment showed continuous residence in a city 4 hours from Renee's hometown. He hadn't grown up where she grew up. He hadn't grown up in her family at all. That weekend, I told Renee I had a work trip near her hometown. I suggested she come along so we could visit her parents. I framed it casually already, knowing she'd refuse proximity to her actual parents. It was the one variable she couldn't control, so it was easier for her to say no. As expected, she said she was busy, but she kept asking me if I would be visiting her parents. I said no, I won't visit them alone. We can plan for the next time. In reality, I had no work trip. I went to her hometown only to meet her parents and uncover her truth. I don't want to get into the details of how I sourced their address. It was on her ID. So I went to their house and immediately told them not to reveal this to Renee because I was planning a surprise for her. Renee's birthday was around the corner a day after tomorrow. So I told them that I was arranging a surprise party for Renee and went there to invite them in person. They were pleased to receive me. Gerald shook my hand with both of his. Diane hugged me in the doorway. Their home was warm, cluttered with family photos, and nothing times about these people suggested the cold, controlling fundamentalists Renee had described. While speaking to them, I eventually opened up and told them that they don't seem conservative at all, not the way Renee had described. Gerald's face changed. Diane set down her tea. Conservative, Gerald said. We begged that girl to stay. I asked about their son. Gerald said, Ryan's in Seattle. We talk every Sunday. I asked carefully if they had another son, a younger one, named Marco. They looked at each other, then back at me, who Diane said slowly is Marco. I drove back to the hotel that night with every window down 80 miles an hour on an empty highway, and the only thought cycling through my head was this. Right now in my apartment, in the home I pay for, Renee and Marco are alone together. And they know exactly what they are to each other. Her birthday was in 2 days, and her parents had just accepted my invitation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger. Anger would have been simpler. I lay in that hotel bed running the math on every conversation, every tear, every perfectly rationed detail she'd fed me over 3 years, and what kept me awake was the precision. This wasn't impulsive. This was architecture. I drove home the next morning, one day before her birthday. Marco was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, and Renee was blow-drying her hair in the bathroom. Everything looked normal. Everything had always looked normal. That was the craft of it. How was the trip, she asked when I kissed her cheek. Productive, I said. Actually, I want to do something special for your birthday tomorrow. Stay home. I'll handle everything. She smiled. The same smile from our second date, the one I'd once mistaken for vulnerability. You don't have to do all that. I want to, I said. I really want to. I spent that day in a kind of surgical calm. I bought a cake. I ordered flowers. I texted Gerald and Diane the address and the time 6 o'clock come straight up the door would be open. Diane sent back a string of heart emojis and wrote that she couldn't wait to see her baby girl. I stared at that message for a long time. These people loved Renee. They had never stopped. She had invented their cruelty the way a novelist invents weather to set the scene for a character who doesn't exist. The morning of her birthday, Renee woke up happy. She stretched across the bed and pulled me toward her and said, 30 looks good on me, don't you think I told her it did? Marco knocked on the bedroom door and wished her happy birthday through the wood. She laughed. I watched the ease between them, the familiarity that I'd once read as sibling comfort, and I saw it clearly now. The way her voice softened half a register when she spoke to him. The way his knock was gentle, almost intimate, 2 taps instead of 3. I told her I was handling dinner. She should relax, get dressed up, enjoy the day. She spent the afternoon doing her makeup while Marco sat on the couch scrolling his phone. At one point I walked past and he looked up at me with those tired eyes and said, "This is really cool of you, man." "Family's important," I said. He nodded. He had no idea what he was nodding to. By 5:30, Renee was in a green dress, her hair pinned up, standing in the kitchen, finishing a salad she'd insisted on making because she said she couldn't just contribute nothing. Marco had changed into a clean shirt. The apartment smelled like garlic and candle wax and the ordinary machinery of a life that had never been real. At 5:58, my phone buzzed. Gerald times. We're in the lobby. Asterisk. I told Renee I'd forgotten something in the car and went downstairs. Gerald was wearing a blazer. Diane was holding a wrapped gift with a bow that looked like she'd spent an hour on it. I shook Gerald's hand, hugged Diane, and led them to the elevator. "She's going to be so surprised," Diane whispered. "Yes," I said. "She is." I opened the apartment door and stepped aside. Diane walked in first. Then Gerald. The hallway opens directly into the kitchen and living room, one continuous space, and Renee was standing at the counter with a knife in one hand and a tomato in the other, and Marco was 3 feet away leaning against the fridge. Diane said, "Baby?" Renee's head turned. The knife stopped. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes went from her mother to her father to me, and I watched the blood leave her face in real time like someone had pulled a plug at the base of her throat. Gerald stepped forward, arms open, and then he saw Marco. He stopped. His arms lowered. "What are you doing here?" Gerald said. Not to Renee, to Marco. Marco straightened. His mouth opened. Closed. "You know each other," I said. I already knew, but I needed the room to hear it. "That's Marco Reyes," Gerald said, his voice flattening into something I hadn't heard from him before. "He's the reason we almost lost our daughter." Renee set the knife down. Her hands were shaking. "Dad, let me." "He's been living here," I said, "for 3 months. Renee told me he was your son, that you disowned him for being gay." The silence that followed had texture. Diane's gift hit the floor. Gerald turned to Renee with an expression I can only describe as a man watching something he built catch fire. "Oh," I said, "Ryan didn't come." "It would have made things easier, isn't it?" Renee flinched, like I'd struck her. Gerald crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, grabbed Marco by the collar of his clean shirt, and dragged him toward the door. Marco didn't resist. He went limp the way someone goes limp when they've always known this moment was coming. Gerald shoved him into the hallway and pointed at the elevator and said something quiet I couldn't hear, and Marco walked away without looking back. Diane was crying. Renee was standing in her green birthday dress in the kitchen she'd been cooking in 2 minutes ago, and she looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her without a story prepared. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough," I said. The divorce took 11 weeks. She signed everything without contest. No negotiation, no lawyers jousting over assets. She showed up to the finalization alone, thinner, wearing no makeup. She didn't look at me. Gerald removed her from the family will. I know this because Diane called me 3 weeks after it was finalized, sobbing into the phone. She said Marco had relapsed. She said Renee was still with him. She said she didn't understand how her daughter, her brilliant, sharp, capable daughter, could throw away everything for a man who couldn't stay clean for 6 consecutive months. I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. What I keep coming back to is this. Renee built an entire mythology. Cold parents, a disowned brother, a woman who'd clawed her way to freedom, and she built it so well that I married the character, not the person. Every detail measured, every tear placed. The woman I admired for her resilience was real, in a way I hadn't understood. She was times resilient. She maintained a lie across years, across a marriage, across the daily architecture of a shared life without a single crack I could see until a piece of mail arrived with the wrong name. That's not weakness. That's a kind of terrifying talent. And she spent all of it on Marco Reyes, a man who the last I heard was sleeping on someone's floor. I think about that sometimes. How the sharpest person I've ever known made the dumbest choice I've ever seen and made it over and over and over again and called it love.
Story 3.
My husband died 6 weeks before his secret walked up to my front door. A teenager. British accent. Holding a shoebox of photos that proved my husband had been flying across the ocean for years to play daddy to a child I never knew existed. So here's what happened. My husband Marcus passed in a workplace accident. I'm still drowning in grief when his 18-year-old son shows up claiming he's family, and half the internet is telling me it's a scam, while the other half is calling me a monster for not welcoming him with open arms. Meanwhile, my 8-year-old is sobbing because she wants her brother and I can barely look at this kid without seeing every lie my marriage was built on. I'm 32. Marcus was my husband. Callum is his son, the one he hid. My daughters are Amara, she's 12, and Zuri, she's 8. My sister Denise won't stop pushing me. And my mom Gloria is convinced we're being conned. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because you need to understand what I thought I had. Marcus grew up in foster care, bounced between 7 homes before he aged out at 18. He told me this on our 3rd date, sitting in a parking lot, eating cold fries, and he said it like he was reading a grocery list. No emotion. Just facts. Then he looked at me and said, I'm going to be the father I never had. That's the only thing I know for sure about myself. I married that man. I married that promise. When Amara was born, he cried so hard the nurses asked if he was okay. When Zuri came, he was the one who noticed something was different before any doctor did. He fought for her evaluations. He sat in every meeting. He learned every acronym. Marcus was not a perfect husband. He traveled too much for work. He shut down during arguments. He had this way of going somewhere behind his eyes where I couldn't reach him. But as a father, I would have bet my life on him. I did bet my life on him. Then he died on a Tuesday. Crane malfunction. They called me at 2:47 p.m. and I remember thinking the number was odd because Marcus always said odd numbers were lucky. I was still wearing his deodorant on my wrists because the grief counselor said familiar scents help. I was still sleeping on his side of the bed. I was still answering his phone when it rang, listening to his voicemails from coworkers who didn't know yet, letting them talk to a dead man. 6 weeks into that. 6 weeks of holding my daughters together with hands I couldn't feel. That's when the doorbell rang. Callum was tall, taller than Marcus. He had Marcus's exact jawline and these light brown eyes that didn't match, but somehow still looked like him. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down like he'd slept in it on the plane. He was shaking. I'm sorry, he said. British accent soft. I'm so sorry. I know this is... I didn't know how my mom passed last year, and Marcus was... He was all I closed the door in his face. Not slammed. Closed. Quietly. Like if I did it gently enough, it wouldn't be real. He left the shoebox on the porch. I opened it at midnight. Photos. Marcus holding a baby in what looked like a London flat. Marcus at a school play sitting in the back row. Marcus pushing a boy on a swing. The boy maybe 7, grinning with missing teeth. Birthday cards in Marcus's handwriting. A boarding school newsletter with Callum Whitfield circled in the honor roll. A photo from maybe 2 years ago, Marcus and a teenage Callum standing outside a pub, Marcus's arm around his shoulder, both of them squinting into the sun. Years. He'd been going for years. Every work trip reshuffled in my mind like a deck of cards being cut. Every time he said conference in London or client meeting in Manchester, I sat on my kitchen floor with those photos spread around me, and I felt my marriage die a second death. This one, slower and uglier than the first. Callum came back 3 days later. This time Denise was with me. Let him talk, Denise said. I don't owe him anything. Nobody said you did. But those girls heard the doorbell last time, and Amara's already Googling, so I let him in. He sat on the edge of my couch like it might burn him, he explained. His mother raised him in London. She and Marcus were never together, a brief relationship. When Marcus was 21 before me, before any of this, she got sick. Marcus started visiting more. When she died, Callum was 17, and Marcus helped him get into university. Then Marcus died, and Callum had no one. I'm not asking for money, he said. He talked about Amara and Zuri. He showed me pictures. I know this is mental. I know you probably hate me. I didn't hate him. I hated what he represented. But I couldn't separate the two yet. Gloria was the one who said it first. Baby, how do we even know this is real? People run scams like this. Man dies suddenly, someone shows up wanting a piece. It landed in my chest like a key finding a lock. A scam. Of course, that was easier. That was survivable. I posted online asking for advice, and the responses split me in half. Half said Times get a DNA test immediately, this is textbook fraud. Asterisk. The other half said Times that boy lost his father too. You're punishing a child for a grown man's choices. Asterisk. I let Denise supervise 2 visits. Controlled, 1 hour each. Zuri attached to Callum like a magnet, this child who struggles with every new person, every transition, every social cue. She climbed onto the couch next to him and started showing him her rock collection. He sat there for 40 minutes asking about every single rock. Amara stayed in her room both times. After the second visit, I told Callum not to come back. Zuri screamed. Not a tantrum, a sound I'd never heard from her. Guttural. She hit the floor and she screamed like something had been torn out of her. He's my brother. Daddy gave me a brother, and you're taking him. I stood in my hallway watching my 8-year-old shatter, and I thought, Times, I am doing the right thing. I am protecting my family. Asterisk. Denise called that night. You need to hear yourself because you sound exactly like Gloria right now. Don't. That boy flew across an ocean. We are not in a place to give anything emotionally or financially, so I recoiled from him. That doesn't make me a monster. Nobody called you a monster. But pushing him away doesn't make him a threat either. I hung up. 2 weeks of silence. Amara started weekly therapy sessions. I tried to get Zuri in too, but she hated it, so I pulled her out for now. The house felt like a held breath. Then the DNA results came back, and Marcus's last lie fell apart. The results were 99.98%. I read the number 4 times, like the decimals might rearrange themselves into something I could argue with. Marcus's son. Marcus's actual biological undeniable son. I sat with the paper on the same kitchen floor where I'd spread those photos weeks before, and I waited for the rage. It came, but not at Callum. It came for the man I'd buried. The man who sat in IEP meetings advocating for his daughter's right to accommodation while his other child ate Christmas dinner alone at boarding school. The man who cried when Amara was born because fatherhood meant Times everything, Times to him while a boy in London already knew the shape of his absence. I called Denise. It's real. Silence. Then, okay. So what now? I don't know. Yes, you do. I let Denise arrange a visit. Saturday noon, the park near the library. Neutral ground. She'd supervise. I wouldn't be there. That was the deal. Then Saturday morning, Denise called with a stomach bug so violent I could hear it through the phone. Reschedule, I said immediately. He's already on the train. He took a bus to the train station at 6 a.m. Then he can take a train back. You call that girl and tell her the brother she screamed for isn't coming because you couldn't sit on a bench for 2 hours. I couldn't. I physically could not make Zuri hear that again. So I went. Callum was already there when we pulled up. He was sitting on a bench with his hands between his knees, and when he saw my car, he stood up so fast he knocked his water bottle off the seat. He looked at me the way you'd look at a dog you weren't sure about. Cautious. Ready to be still. He was scared of me. That hit somewhere I wasn't prepared for. Callum Zuri was out of the car before I'd fully stopped running across the grass with her rock bag bouncing against her hip. He crouched down and she crashed into him already, talking about a geode she'd cracked open, about a show she'd watched, about how she'd saved him the best quartz, because the white ones are common, but this one had a pink vein. Through it. C times. C asterisk. He looked at the rock like she'd handed him something holy. Amara stayed by me, arms crossed. She watched her sister and this stranger brother with an expression I recognized because I'd been wearing it for weeks, the face of someone calculating how much more loss they can afford. You don't have to go over there, I said. I know. We sat on a bench 30 feet away. I pretended to look at my phone. Amara pretended to read. We were both watching Callum teach Zuri how to skip stones in the creek, his throws exaggerated and terrible on purpose so she'd laugh. He has Dad's arm thing, Amara said quietly. What? When he throws? That hitch? Dad did that. I looked. She was right. The same slight pause at the top of the arc, like the arm was asking permission from the shoulder. Genetic. Inherited. A dead man's motion living in a stranger's body. Amara's jaw tightened. She went back to her book. But 10 minutes later, she was standing at the creek's edge, not participating, just times closer times, and Callum didn't push. He didn't even acknowledge her approach. He just kept skipping stones with Zuri and left the space open. Smart kid. We stayed 3 hours. I said maybe 40 words total, most of them. Be careful near the water. Callum said even less to me. Thank you for coming at the beginning. Thank you for today at the end. Both times he couldn't quite meet my eyes. I wasn't trying to hurt him or scare him, but I had, and knowing that sat in my chest like a stone with no pink vein through it. Many people online and off shared their own stories of being separated from biological relations and the effect it had on them. Adopted kids who found siblings at 40 and grieved the decades between. Half-brothers who grew up in the same city and never knew. I read every single message. I don't fully understand it because genes don't mean much to me. I've never felt pulled toward anyone by blood alone. But I don't have to understand it to respect it. Denise agreed to continue supervising visits. Twice a month became 3 times. Callum never asked for more. He never asked for money. He never asked me a single question about Marcus, though I could see him swallow them sometimes, these unasked things moving behind his careful eyes. The shift happened on a Wednesday in October. Zuri was having a bad day, overstimulated nonverbal rocking on the living room floor with her hands over her ears. I was on the phone with her occupational therapist trying to get an emergency appointment. Denise was in the kitchen looking helpless, and Callum, who was there for a scheduled visit, sat down on the floor 6 feet away from Zuri, said nothing, and started sorting her rock collection by color. He didn't touch her, didn't talk to her, just sorted rocks slowly, where she could see his hands. After 20 minutes, she crawled over and corrected his categories: sedimentary, igneous, metamorphic, not color. He nodded seriously and let her rebuild the whole system. I stood in the doorway and thought about Marcus saying times I'm going to be the father I never had. Asterisk, he'd meant it. I believe he'd meant it every time. But meaning something and doing it are different currencies, and Marcus had been bankrupt in ways I was only beginning to map. That night, I wrote Callum a card. Nothing elaborate. Asterisk. Thank you for being patient with her. I hope you'll stay involved. Asterisk. By Thanksgiving the following year, he brought his girlfriend, a polite, quiet girl named Sophie, who Zuri immediately decided was her rival for Callum's attention. Amara, now 14, rolled her eyes at her sister's jealousy, and then spent the entire meal asking Sophie about university in London, with an intensity that told me exactly where my daughter's college list was heading. I watched them across my table. Marcus's 3 children together in a room he never allowed to exist. I don't know why he lived the way he did. I have a theory that a boy who grew up in 7 homes learned to keep his worlds in separate boxes because that's how he survived, and he never unlearned it, even when the stakes changed. Even when the boxes held people who deserved to know about each other, I'll never confirm this. The only person who could explain is gone, and he left no voicemails for me. Just cards in a shoebox addressed to a boy I almost turned away. I personally don't feel like I'm in any place to have a relationship with Callum, and I don't think he wants one with me. We are something unnamed, 2 people orbiting the same wound, making room. But my girls have a brother, and their brother has a family. Marcus couldn't build that bridge. He was too busy maintaining the walls. I tore them down. Not gracefully, not willingly most days, but down.
Story 4.
My sister-in-law sat across from me at dinner, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me she'd be taking my 3-month-old baby home with her during the week so she could finally be a mother. And she wasn't joking. What started as years of quiet tension over her infertility exploded into a full psychiatric crisis after she watched me breastfeed my son, and within weeks she was involuntarily committed after telling her psychiatrist. Things so alarming. They classified her as an active danger to me and my baby. Then, in our second story, a mother-in-law who works at the DMV decided to forge her own son's signature and slap her name on a car title that wasn't hers. So, I'm 36, married to Marcus, and Denise is his older sister. Craig is Denise's husband, and Patricia is my mother-in-law. In the second story, I'm 24, my fiancé is Derek, and his mother Lorraine works at the DMV, which she apparently thinks makes her above the law. Denise and I were never close, but we were civil. For 10 years, we shared holidays, swapped birthday gifts, and kept the kind of peace that holds a family together when 2 people simply don't click. The tension was always there, low-grade humming beneath every interaction, but I understood where it came from, and that understanding kept me patient longer than most people would have been. Denise was diagnosed with unexplained infertility at 30. By the time she was 35, she and Craig had burned through 3 rounds of IVF, 2 failed adoptions, and what Craig once quietly told Marcus was close to $90,000. Every pregnancy announcement in the family landed on her like a physical blow. When I had my first child, my daughter, now 4, Denise didn't come to the hospital. She sent flowers. Nobody blamed her. Grief makes people do strange things, and absence is one of the kinder options. But something shifted when I got pregnant with my son. Denise started calling more. Texting. Showing up at the house unannounced with baby clothes she'd bought. Neutral colors, expensive brands, tags still on. She asked to come to my ultrasound. She asked to be in the delivery room. Each request came wrapped in this desperate sweetness that made my stomach clench because I could see what was happening even if nobody else wanted to name it. She wasn't celebrating my pregnancy. She was auditioning for a role in it. Marcus told me I was reading too much into it. Patricia said Denise was finally healing. Craig said nothing, which I now realize was its own kind of alarm. My son was born in February. Healthy, perfect mind. Denise visited the hospital the day after delivery, held him for 40 minutes, and cried the entire time. Not quiet tears, deep shaking, sobs that made the nurses look at each other. When I gently took him back to feed him, she stood up and left without saying goodbye. 3 months passed. Denise pulled back again, fewer texts declined, 2 family dinners. Then Patricia organized a Sunday dinner at our house, insisted everyone come, said the family needed togetherness. I agreed because I was exhausted in choosing battles, and this one didn't seem worth fighting. Denise arrived with a diaper bag, not a purse. A fully stocked diaper bag, diapers, wipes, a change of clothes, formula, a pacifier for a baby she didn't have. I noticed it the second she walked in, and the hair on my arms stood straight up. Marcus didn't see it. Patricia didn't see it. Craig saw it. I watched his face go white, watched him lean into Denise and whisper something, watched her shake him off with a sharp jerk of her shoulder. Dinner was fine for the first 20 minutes. Normal conversation, my daughter showing Denise her drawings, Craig complimenting the food. Then my son started fussing in his bassinet. I picked him up, settled into the corner of the couch, and started breastfeeding. I'd done this 100 times in front of family. It was nothing. Denise went still. Not quiet time still, asterisk. Like something behind her eyes locked into place. She stared at my son, latched to my breast with an intensity that made me angle my body away from her instinctively. The room kept talking. Nobody noticed. I noticed. Then she spoke. "I've been thinking," she said, and the table conversation died. "It would be really good for the baby if he spent weekdays with me and Craig. I could create a real motherly bond with him. You'd still have weekends." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Denise, Craig said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We talked about this." "No times you times talked," she said, not breaking eye contact with me. "I'm talking now. It's only fair. You have 2. I have none. That's not balanced, and everyone at this table knows it. My daughter was sitting 3 feet away coloring. My son was still nursing. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out flat and hard in a way I didn't recognize. That is never going to happen. You don't get to decide that alone," Denise said. "Marcus, Patricia, this is a family decision." Marcus put his fork down. "Denise, you need to stop." "Why?" "Because she said so." Denise's voice cracked. "She gets everything. She gets times, everything times, and I get nothing. And nobody in this family has ever once, get out of my house." I said it while still holding my son, still feeding him. My body hadn't moved, but something in my face must have, because Craig was already standing, already reaching for Denise's arm. "We're leaving," Craig said. "Denise, now." She grabbed the diaper bag on her way out. That detail kept me up for 3 nights straight. Craig called Marcus at midnight. What he told us made my blood run cold. 2 nights before the dinner, Denise had tried to leave the house at 3 in the morning. Craig found her in the car engine running, repeating that she needed to check on her baby. He'd also found her browser history, dozens of searches on how to induce lactation without pregnancy, how to establish custody of a relative's child, and how long a baby could survive on formula if the mother wasn't present. Craig was sobbing on the phone. He said he'd already made an appointment with a psychiatrist. The earliest opening was 10 days out. He was scared. He was sorry. He didn't know what she was becoming. Patricia moved into Craig and Denise's house the next morning. Not to visit, to watch. I changed every lock in our house, installed cameras on both doors, and called my daughter's preschool to update the pickup authorization list. Marcus handled it like Marcus handles everything, steady, methodical, quietly terrified underneath. We didn't sleep in the same rhythm for a week. One of us was always awake, always listening. Then the psychiatrist appointment finally came, and what Denise said in that room changed everything. Craig called Marcus on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual because Craig never called during work hours. Marcus stepped out of the kitchen. He runs a small catering operation, the kind that keeps your hands busy and your phone on silent, and came back 11 minutes later, looking like someone had hollowed him out from the sternum down. "The psychiatrist is requesting an emergency evaluation," he said. Denise told her she has a plan. A plan for what? Marcus sat down at the table across from me. Our son was sleeping in the next room. Our daughter was at preschool. The house was quiet enough to hear the cameras click through their rotation cycle on the front porch monitor. She told the psychiatrist that she'd been chosen to raise our son, that I would eventually agree because I'd see it was right. That you were, he stopped, swallowed, that you were an obstacle and that obstacles get removed. My hands went to the table. Flat. Pressing down. Like if I didn't anchor myself to something solid, I'd come apart at the molecular level. She said that to a doctor. In a session, she said it calmly. Craig said the psychiatrist told him Denise presented it like a logical argument. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. She had times, contingencies, times, Marcus said. For if Craig didn't cooperate. For if Patricia sided with us. For if I didn't give him up. Marcus nodded. He couldn't say it again. The psychiatrist, Dr. Alana Voss, a name I will never forget, made the call that afternoon. Under state law, when a mental health professional determines a patient poses an imminent danger to a specific individual, they don't ask permission, they act. Doctor, Voss contacted the county crisis team. By 6 o'clock that evening, Denise was involuntarily committed to an inpatient psychiatric facility on a 72-hour hold that was extended within 48 hours to a minimum of 14 days. Craig called us from the facility parking lot. He wasn't sobbing this time. He was past that. His voice had the flat, scraped-out quality of a man who just watched his wife escorted through locked doors while she screamed his name. She thinks I betrayed her, he said. She thinks this is proof that the whole family is conspiring against her. Craig, I said, because Marcus couldn't? You saved her life, and you might have saved my son's? He hung up without responding. The next 72 hours were mechanical. I called the preschool again, not just to update the pickup list, but to provide Denise's photo and a physical description. I called our pediatrician's office and flagged the file. Marcus installed a deadbolt on the nursery door, which is something no parent should ever have to do, and something I stared at every single night while feeding my son at 2 a.m, wondering what kind of world requires a lock between a baby and the hallway of his own home. Patricia drove back and forth between the facility and Craig's house, like a woman running a supply line in wartime. She brought Craig meals, she brought Denise books and a blanket from home. She called me once on day 4 and said I failed her. I saw the signs and I called it healing because that was easier. I didn't argue with her. She was right. Marcus and I had the conversation every couple dreads, the one where you sit across from each other after the kids are asleep and say the quiet thing out loud. When she gets out, I said, she's not coming near this house. Ever. Ever. And holidays, birthdays, Patricia's. Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes. I don't know yet. But our kids come first. They come before Denise's feelings, before Craig's guilt, before my mother's need to hold this family together with both hands. Your sister is sick, Marcus. My sister described removing you like a task on a checklist. That's not sick in a way that earns her access to our children. That's sick in a way that means the door stays locked. He was right. I hated that he was right. We won't be moving. It's not feasible for us at the moment, but we have taken extra steps with security both at home and at the kitchen. This whole thing has taken a toll on my family, but Patricia, Craig, and the treatment team are taking care of Denise, and Marcus and I are focused on ensuring the safety of our immediate family and minimizing the effect on the kids as much we can. My daughter asked me last week why Aunt Denise doesn't come to dinner anymore. I told her Aunt Denise is getting help from some very good doctors. She accepted that the way 4-year-olds accept most things completely temporarily, with the unspoken promise of asking again later. My son is 5 months old now. He laughs when his sister makes faces at him. He grabs my hair when I carry him. He has no idea that someone mapped out a plan to take him from me with the calm precision of someone organizing a grocery list. I grieve for Denise. I do. I grieve for the woman who sent flowers when she couldn't bring herself to visit the hospital because that woman was surviving her pain without converting it into someone else's nightmare. That woman is gone now, or buried under something I am not qualified to excavate. It's an incredibly sad situation for both parties, and unfortunately, it's a reality for a lot of families out there. Infertility breaks people in ways that don't always look like breaking. Sometimes it looks like love misdirected and metastasized until the person carrying it can't tell the difference between wanting a child and wanting. Asterisk yours, asterisk. The deadbolt stays on the nursery door. The cameras stay on. Patricia stays in Craig's guest room. And I stay awake, one ear always tuned to the monitor, listening for sounds that don't belong in my house. The family survives. But the version of it that existed before that Sunday dinner, the one held together by civility and willful blindness, and the quiet agreement to never name what was growing in Denise's silence, that family is gone. We're building a different one now. Smaller, fortified, scarred in places that won't fully heal. But mine?
Story 5.
My mother-in-law once left a voicemail for my own mother where she bragged, and I quote, "I get people to do what I want for a living." I laughed it off back then. I have not laughed about it in a very long time. So here's the short version. I married into a family where love is basically a rewards program. My mother-in-law runs it like a CEO, and my biggest mistake was helping her golden child move 100 yards from my front door, because now my 3.5-year-old daughter gets to watch her grandparents walk right past our house to spoil her cousin every single day. I'm 34 female and I am running on fumes. My husband is Kyle, he's 35, and he spent his whole life trying to earn something from his mother that she was never actually selling. His mom is Barbara, early 60s, and if manipulation were a profession, she'd have a corner office, which she basically admits. His dad is Don, acts like he's too busy with golf to notice anything, but funny how he's always available when it's the other grandkid. Kyle's younger brother is Ryan, early 30s. Barbara's compliant one, the good son, and his wife Megan is honestly one of the kindest people I know, which makes all of this so much harder. The thing you need to understand about Barbara is that she announced herself early. I just wasn't listening. Our wedding was the first real test. Kyle and I planned it ourselves, paid for it ourselves, and Barbara treated that independence like a personal insult. She called about the seating chart. Then she called about the schedule. Then she called about who would stand where in family photos, which relatives deserved +1s, whether the ceremony was too long or the cocktail hour too short. When I politely held my ground on a few decisions, my wedding, my call, she went quiet in a way that felt less like acceptance and more like someone writing your name in a ledger. That's when the voicemail happened. She called my mother ostensibly to discuss logistics and left a rambling message that ended with that line. Asterisk, I get people to do what I want for a living. Asterisk, my mom played it for me with wide eyes. I laughed. Actually laughed. She's just intense, I said. Ryan pulled me aside at the rehearsal dinner. He had this tight, careful smile, the kind you learn when you grow up in a house where the wrong expression gets cataloged. Just so you know, he said quietly, you don't want her mad. Trust me, it's not worth it. I thanked him. I thought he was being dramatic. He wasn't being dramatic. He was giving me the only survival manual he had. The silent treatment started during my first pregnancy. Kyle and I had hit a rough patch, normal marriage stuff amplified by hormones and stress, and somehow Barbara got wind of it. Instead of support, she sent Kyle a letter. A handwritten, multi-page letter encouraging him to consider divorce. From his mother, while his wife was pregnant. Kyle showed it to me with shaking hands. Not shaking from anger. Shaking the way someone shakes when the person who's supposed to love them unconditionally just put conditions in writing. We started therapy. Our couple's therapist listened to about 3 sessions worth of Barbara's stories before she set her pen down and said something I'll never forget. Your mother-in-law is a piece of work and she will never change. You need to decide what you're willing to live with. We weren't ready to hear that. We filed it away, under maybe later, and kept trying. Then I almost died. Preeclampsia. Severe. My blood pressure spiked so high the doctors were prepping for an emergency delivery, while Kyle stood in the hallway, calling his parents to tell them their grandchild might be coming 10 weeks early. Barbara's response was measured almost clinical. She asked logistical questions. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not come to the hospital. Our daughter arrived safely a few weeks early, but healthy, and something shifted. Barbara showed up for the baby. She was attentive, even warm in those fragile newborn months. I let myself believe the therapist was wrong. I let myself believe a granddaughter had done what a daughter-in-law couldn't, cracked something open in her. That piece lasted until Megan got pregnant. The moment Ryan and Megan announced their pregnancy, I felt the temperature change. Not from Megan. Megan was glowing, and I was genuinely thrilled for her. From Barbara, it was like watching someone spot a better investment. Her visits to our daughter didn't stop immediately. They tapered. Gradually enough that you'd question yourself if you tried to name the exact week it started. When their son was born, Barbara was at the hospital for the delivery. She posted about it on Facebook before Megan's own parents knew. She took a week off work. She cooked meals, organized the nursery, stayed overnight. She had not done any of those things for us. Kyle didn't say anything about it. He just got quieter. He has this way of going still when something hits the old wound jaw, set eyes fixed on some middle distance, and I've learned not to push. He was processing a lifetime of being the son who tried harder and got less. Then Megan mentioned they were thinking of moving closer to us. They'd been living 40 minutes away, and with the baby, the commute to see family was wearing on them. My heart jumped. I loved Megan. I wanted our kids to grow up together. So I immediately went to work trying to help them find a good house in the area. We ended up helping Ryan and Megan get a house in our fairly small 100-house neighborhood. It's a very nice and unique neighborhood with large lots that aren't typical in our area. The houses typically don't even have to be put on the market to sell because the school district is that desirable. We pulled strings. We made calls. We did not fully think this through. Our relationship with Barbara had always been so separate from our relationship with Ryan and Megan, mainly because Kyle and Ryan don't really have a relationship because Barbara designed it that way. But Megan and I did. I thought proximity would strengthen that bond. I didn't consider that proximity would also give Barbara a permanent stage. In January of this year, they moved into their new house, 100 yards from ours. And then we learned about the money. Barbara and Don gave Ryan and Megan $250,000 toward their purchase. They'd given us $100,000 for ours years earlier, which we'd been genuinely grateful for. I did the math. Then I did it again. Then I stopped doing math and started watching. Barbara's car began appearing in Ryan's driveway 3-4 times a week. Don, who'd missed our daughter's birthday because of a golf tournament, was suddenly spotted unloading groceries from his trunk on a Tuesday afternoon at Ryan's house on our street. And my daughter, my bright, observant 3.5-year-old daughter, started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Mama, how come Grandma's at their house again? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That was the week everything finally broke. It broke in pieces. Small, specific pieces that I cataloged the way you catalog evidence when you're building a case you don't want to win. The first piece, our daughter got sick. Not emergency room sick, but miserable fever of 103 glassy eyes that pitiful whimper kids make when they don't understand why their body's betraying them. I texted Barbara. Not to ask for help, just to let her know. Grandparent courtesy. She responded with a thumbs up emoji and said she hoped she felt better soon. 2 hours later, Megan texted me that Barbara had just arrived at their house because their son had the same bug. Same virus, probably passed between the cousins at a playdate earlier that week. Barbara brought homemade soup, Pedialyte popsicles, and a stuffed elephant she'd picked up on the way over. She stayed until bedtime. I stared at my phone in my daughter's dark room, her sweaty head on my chest, and felt something I can only describe as a click. Like a lock engaging. Like the last tumbler falling into place on something I'd been refusing to see clearly for years. The second piece, Christmas. Barbara gave our nephew a battery-powered ride-on truck, a personalized storybook, a monogram backpack for preschool, and a set of wooden toys that I later looked up $180. Our daughter opened her gifts from Grandma and Grandpa on our living room floor, a clearance sticker shirt from Marshall's, a coloring book, and a pack of hair ties. I know they were clearance because Barbara hadn't peeled the orange sticker off the shirt. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she didn't care enough to check. Maybe, and this is the thought that woke me up at 3 a.m., she wanted me to see it. Kyle held the shirt up after our daughter ran off to play. He turned it over in his hands, looked at the sticker, set it down on the counter without a word, and went to the garage. I heard him start the leaf blower even though it was December and there were no leaves. The third piece, overnights. Barbara told us to our faces that she wouldn't keep our daughter overnight until she was fully potty trained. I just can't deal with accidents at my age, she said with this practice-sounding sigh. Fine. Except their nephew, who is a full 1.5 years younger and nowhere near potty-trained, sleeps at Barbara and Don's house every other weekend. Megan mentioned it casually. She wasn't rubbing it in. Megan doesn't have that in her. She just didn't know about the rule because the rule was never about potty training. The fourth piece, Don. Quiet golf obsessed. I'm just along for the ride, Don. The man who'd missed our daughter's third birthday because he had a tournament he couldn't get out of. I'd accepted that. Don loves golf. Don is Don. Except now, Don's truck was parked at Ryan's house on a Tuesday, then a Thursday, then Saturday morning bright and early unloading a toy kitchen from his truck bed while our daughter watched from our front window. Mama, is Papa bringing us something too? No, baby, not today. How come? I didn't answer. I just picked her up and carried her to the back of the house where she couldn't see the street. Kyle and I sat at our kitchen table that night after she was asleep. I had my phone open to a post I'd written on a parenting forum, just vomiting the whole story out to strangers because I didn't trust my own perception anymore. The responses were already pouring in. Hundreds of them. Kyle read over my shoulder. He didn't speak for a long time. Then his hand came up and pressed against his eyes, and his shoulders did something I'd only seen once before the day he showed me his mother's divorce letter. It's not going to get better, he said. The therapist told us. Years ago. I know. I kept thinking, if I just... He stopped, swallowed. If I was just enough. If I did enough. She'd... I know, Kyle. He dropped his hand. His eyes were red, but his jaw was set in that way. I recognized that stillness that used to look like stoicism, but I now understood was a man who learned very young that crying made things worse. We're done, he said. Not a question. We're done. We went no contact the following week. No letter, no dramatic phone call, no explanation Barbara could twist into evidence of our unreasonableness. Just silence. The thing she'd weaponized against us for years returned to sender. We grieve Ryan and Megan separately. We know what $250,000 buys. It buys Thanksgiving attendance and Sunday dinners and the inability to say times your mother is cruel times without risking everything. Megan still texts me. I still love her, but I can feel Barbara's gravity pulling her into orbit, and I know the math. I can't compete with $250,000 and a woman who lives to control. Our daughter will ask harder questions soon. She'll want to know why Grandma's car is always at her cousin's house but never at ours. She'll want to know what she did wrong, and I will get down on my knees and hold her face in my hands and tell her times, nothing. You did nothing wrong. Some people have a sickness in the way they love, and it was never ever about you. Asterisk. I will say it as many times as she needs to hear it. I will say it until she believes it. And then I will say it to Kyle because he needed to hear it 30 years ago and no one ever did.
Story 6.
I know what he's telling everyone. I know what he probably posted online. He's the good guy, the loving husband who got his heart broken by a cheating wife just a few months after their wedding. It's a simple story, and in a way it's true. I did those things. I'm the villain. It's easier for him to see it that way, and honestly, it's easier for me too. But it's not the whole story. We were together for 8 years. When I met him, he was this force of nature. He had a big goofy laugh hair that was always a mess and a habit of walking around barefoot. He was a hippie soul, and I fell for it hard. He made me feel free. He didn't care about plans or careers or what anyone thought. He was just pure chaotic energy, and I loved it. But you can't build a life on chaotic energy. Love is great, but love doesn't pay the bills or clean the bathroom. Slowly, without even realizing it at first, our life became a project and I was the manager. He was brilliant, but he had no drive. He'd leave dishes in the sink until they grew science experiments. He'd spend entire weekends gaming with his friends, perfectly happy in his own little world. I was the one who set up a budget. I was the one who nagged him about finding a real job with benefits. He calls it whipping him into shape. I call it dragging him, kicking and screaming into basic adulthood. For years I told myself this was what I wanted. I was making a partner, building a future. I convinced myself that I loved the idea of a house in the country with a couple of kids and a dog. It was the dream, right? But his family never quite saw it that way. To them, especially to his father, I was the uptight city girl who was ruining their fun-loving son. I'll never forget the first time I met his dad. I was wearing a nice top with long sleeves, and he looked me up and down and said to my husband, "Son, I don't trust anyone who covers their arms." He laughed, but he wasn't really joking. They saw me as the person who was sanding down all his rough, interesting edges. The worst part is they were right. I did it. I pushed him to be more responsible, more organized, more stable. And it worked. He got the good job. He started helping around the house. He became the perfect, reliable man. But somewhere along the way, I lost all respect for him. He became so compliant. He'd just agree with whatever I said. He'd let me make all the decisions. He says I let him walk all over me, but that's not what it felt like. It felt like I was the only one walking, and he was just following a few steps behind, doing whatever I told him to. The man I fell in love with would have argued with me, challenged me, told me I was being crazy. This new version just said, "Okay, whatever you think is best." We got married last October. It was a beautiful wedding. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. A few weeks later, we were talking to a mortgage broker about a home buyer loan. He was so excited, showing me pictures of houses with big yards. All I could hear was a cell door slamming shut. This was it. The final step in a life I had built for someone else, a life I realized I didn't want at all. I was suffocating. I looked at this wonderful, kind, passive man I had created, and I felt nothing. The affair was a grenade. A stupid, selfish, destructive act. It lasted less than a week. It was with a guy who didn't know me as a wife or a project manager. He just saw me. He made me laugh, and for a few days, I didn't have to be in charge of anyone. I felt like myself again, the person I was before I spent 8 years molding another human being. It was a terrible thing to do, but it was like a gasp for air after holding my breath for years. When it was over, I knew I couldn't go back. The life I had with my husband was a lie, and I had to end it. I sat him down on the couch, the same one where we'd planned our wedding. My heart was pounding. I tried to do it right, to be honest, without being cruel. "I'm not happy," I said. "I feel like I've been trying so hard to make you into this perfect husband that I've dulled your spirit. I've erased the man I fell in love with." I told him I didn't lust after him anymore, that our connection was gone. I was telling him that our entire dynamic was broken. I was confessing that I had ruined us. And all he heard was that I didn't like that he played video games, or that he needed to go to the gym more. He started defending himself, listing all the things he did for me, all the ways he was a good husband. He couldn't see the real problem. He saw a perfect life that I was suddenly trying to ruin for no reason. I saw a perfect lie that was killing me. The conversation went nowhere. He just sat there completely bewildered while I felt the walls closing in even tighter. He couldn't understand, and I was too much of a coward to just say the one thing that would make it all make sense to him. He left the house for a while to clear his head, and I just sat there, feeling like the worst person on earth. He came back a few days later. The sad, confused look was gone. His face was a hard mask. He didn't look at me like his wife anymore. He looked at me like a problem he needed to solve, like a suspect. He'd been talking to people, getting advice from strangers on the internet, I'm sure. The soft, compliant man I'd spent years creating was gone, and in his place was someone I didn't recognize at all. He stood in the doorway and just stared at me, and I knew this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an interrogation. "Are you cheating on me?" That was the first thing he said. "No, hello, no, we need to talk." He just stood there with his arms crossed, his voice flat and cold. It wasn't a question born from heartbreak. It was an accusation. He already knew the answer. He just needed to hear me say it out loud. All my attempts to explain the deep, complicated rot at the center of our relationship had been a waste of breath. He'd boiled it all down to the simplest, ugliest explanation, the one that made him the victim and me the monster. And in that moment I was just so tired. Tired of managing, tired of explaining, tired of trying to get him to see the big picture he was never going to see. So I gave him the confession he wanted. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't even shake. It felt like I was talking about someone else. Something inside him just broke. The cold, hard mask cracked, and for a second I saw the man I'd hurt. It was a flash of pure pain, and it was horrible. I deserved his anger. I deserved his hate. I deserved every terrible thing he was about to say to me. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open as if the single word had knocked the wind out of him. Then the anger flooded in to replace the pain. With who he demanded. It doesn't matter. It's over. It was a symptom, not the... "I don't care about your excuses," he cut me off, his voice rising. "Who was it?" I told him. It was no one he knew, which was a small mercy. The name meant nothing to him, but saying it out loud made it real. It sealed the ugliness of it. He took a step back, shaking his head, and let out this hollow, bitter laugh. After everything, he whispered, "After 8 years. We just got married." He said it like I had forgotten. Like the wedding vows were a magic spell that should have fixed the fact that I was drowning. The fight, if you can call it that, didn't last long. It was ugly and brutal. I didn't defend myself. What was there to say I had done the one thing you can't take back? I had given him a simple reason to hate me, and he grabbed onto it like a lifeline. Finally, he pointed toward the door. "Get out. This is my house too," I said, a weak flicker of defiance. "Not anymore," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get your things and go. I want you gone by the time I get back." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house that was supposed to be our future. I stood there for a long time in the silence, feeling nothing and everything all at once. Packing felt surreal. Every object I touched was a memory. The stupid mug he'd bought me on our first vacation. The framed photo from our wedding on the nightstand, two smiling strangers. Leaving our home felt like both an eviction and an escape. I walked out the door with a single suitcase and didn't look back. I called my mom, crying so hard I could barely speak, and she told me to just come. My family was heading to a cabin in the mountains for the week, and I could join them. A few hours later, I was in the back of their car watching the city and the life I'd built shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. The trip to the mountains was the first time I had been truly alone in my own head in almost a decade. For 8 years, my thoughts had been full of him, his schedule, his career, his moods, our budget, our future. I was constantly managing, planning, pushing. Up there with nothing but pine trees and cold, clean air, there was silence. I didn't have to manage anyone. I didn't have to perform. I just had to times be asterisk. I took long walks by myself, feeling the crunch of snow under my boots. I sat by the fire and stared into the flames for hours. For the first time, I could honestly ask myself what times I wanted. And I didn't have an answer. But I knew with absolute certainty that what I'd just left behind wasn't it. The affair was the escape hatch, but the prison was the life I'd so carefully constructed. There was no going back. A few weeks later, his lawyer contacted mine. He was filing for divorce. He wanted it uncontested. He didn't want a thing from me other than for me to be gone. It was a strange kind of relief. An uncontested divorce as my final act of management, a clean, efficient end to a project that should have been scrapped years ago. I signed the papers without a fight. He will always need a villain to make sense of this. I understand that. He needs to believe that we had a perfect marriage, and I threw it all away for a meaningless fling with some random guy. It's a much easier story for him to live with. It's easier than him looking back and seeing that I slowly erased the man he was. It's easier than him understanding that his passivity and my need for control created a dynamic that suffocated us both. The truth is, our perfect marriage was the one thing that was killing me. I looked at the next 40 years of being a capable, responsible manager for a kind, compliant man I no longer respected, and I couldn't breathe. I did a terrible, unforgivable thing. But I had to cheat my way out just to survive. He thinks I blew up his life. Maybe someday he'll realize I just set us both free from a beautifully decorated cage we had built together. Or maybe he won't. Either way, I'm the bad guy. And I finally made my peace with that.
Story 7.
I'm sure you've heard his side of the story. I'm the wife, the one he calls Dub Dub, the woman who lied for over 30 years. It's a simple story when he tells it. I cheated, I lied, he found out, and now our marriage is a sham. It's clean, it's easy, and it makes me the villain. But it's not the truth. Not the whole truth, anyway. To understand, you have to understand who I was back then. I was 20 years old when I went to South America. 20. I thought I was so grown up joining a volunteer program going to save the world. I wanted to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was strong and independent. The reality was very different. The heat was suffocating. I didn't speak the language well. Every day was a struggle, and I was so lonely. The person I was, supposed to be this brave, adventurous woman, was just a scared girl who cried herself to sleep most nights. My boyfriend, my husband now, was back in the U.S. He'd write me these wonderful letters about his classes, his friends, his life. I loved getting them, but they also made me feel a million miles away. They were a reminder of a life I wasn't living, a world that was moving on without me. He couldn't possibly understand what it was like. He couldn't understand the isolation, the feeling of being completely invisible in a crowd of people. And then there was someone who did understand. A coworker in the program. It didn't start as anything big. It wasn't a plan. It was just a shared look when something went wrong. A laugh over a terrible meal. A hand on my shoulder when I was having a bad day. He was times there asterisk. He was real and in the present when my actual life felt like it was on hold. I wasn't looking for an affair. I was just looking for a friend, for someone to make the loneliness stop screaming in my head for a little while. It drifted from friendship into something more. It was a comfort, a way to feel something other than lost. I knew it was wrong, of course I did. I felt sick with guilt every single day. I wrote everything down in my diary. Every confusing thought, every moment of guilt, every bit of it. I had no one else to talk to. The diary was my only friend, the only place I could try to make sense of the person I was becoming. I didn't even recognize her myself. She was messy and selfish and weak. I hated her. Things got real when my boyfriend came to visit for the first time. Seeing him was like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. This was my real life. This was the man I loved. But having him there in that place, it just made everything so much worse. The guilt was a physical thing, like a stone in my stomach. I couldn't look him in the eye. After he left, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live with a secret. In January, I sent him a letter. I told him I was seeing someone else. I couldn't bring myself to write the whole truth, all the ugly details from my diary. It was too much. I thought if I just told him a little bit, just cracked the door open on this horrible secret, he could help me shut it for good. I was hoping he would save me from myself. He called me after he got the letter. I remember standing in a hot, dusty office, the phone cord wrapped around my hands so tight my knuckles were white. His voice wasn't angry, not at first. It was just firm. Clear. He told me that if I wanted us to have a future, I had to end it. Right then. No excuses. He gave me a choice, an ultimatum. And honestly, it was the biggest relief of my life. He gave me a way out, a path back to him, back to the person I wanted to be. I grabbed onto it like a drowning woman. I promised him I'd end it, and I did. In my heart, in my head, it was over that second. I told him it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything. Because that's what it had to be. In the story of the life I wanted with him, this affair could only be a small, stupid mistake. A footnote. So I packed all the other feelings, all the messy details into a box in my mind, and I locked it shut. When he visited the second time, it was different. I was myself again. I was his. The girl who wrote those diaries was gone. I left her behind in South America. We got married a few months after I came home. For the next 34 years, we built a life. A real life. We had kids, we bought a house, we had inside jokes and favorite restaurants. We were happy. Past that mistake, it wasn't a secret I was keeping. It was just gone. It was a blurry photo from an album I never looked at. I truly, genuinely forgot the details. My mind just wiped them away because they didn't fit into the beautiful life we had built. Then 3 years ago, he sat me down in the living room. He had this serious look on his face, and I actually got a little excited. I thought, finally he wants to have one of those deep talks people are always talking about. He wants to connect. I leaned forward, ready to listen. And then he said he wanted to talk about my time in South America. I just stared at him. I was so confused. That was 35 years ago, I said. It wasn't a deflection. It wasn't me being difficult. It was the honest-to-God truth of how I felt. It was another lifetime. It was about another person. It had absolutely nothing to do with us. With the 60-year-old woman sitting on the couch next to him. He didn't see it that way. My confusion just made him angry. He said I was minimizing what happened. The conversation didn't go well. For the next few weeks, there was a strange quiet in the house. He was distant, looking at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I tried to talk to him, but it was like he was behind a glass wall. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and the house was too quiet. I called his name, no answer. I checked the hole downstairs, then went up. I heard a noise from the attic, a scraping sound. I climbed the pull-down stairs and my heart just stopped. The attic was a mess of old boxes and forgotten things. And there, in the middle of it all, was my husband. He was sitting on the floor with a dusty cardboard box in front of him. A box I hadn't seen since we moved in 30 years ago. My box. He pulled out a small faded cloth-bound book. Then another. My diaries. He looked up at me, his face pale, and then he opened the first one to a random page. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry, not really. He just looked empty. He opened the book and his voice was flat, hollow as he started to read an entry. The words were mine. I recognized the handwriting, but the person he was describing felt like a stranger. He read about a date, a kiss, a feeling of excitement mixed with guilt. It was the voice of a confused, lonely girl. "Stop," I whispered. "Please don't." He just turned a page. "This is from January 15th, 1984, he said, his voice as sharp as glass. "The day after I called you. The day after you promised me it was over." He read the entry aloud. It was about seeing the other man again. About how hard it was to say goodbye. About how it didn't feel over at all. My blood ran cold. I stared at him, my mind a complete blank. "I don't remember writing that," I said, and it was the truth. I didn't. In my memory, our phone call was a clean break. He gave me an ultimatum and I took it. End of story. But here was proof in my own hand that the story I'd lived with for 35 years was a lie. He kept reading. He read passages from February, from March. He read about my second visit with him and then an entry from the week after I got back about meeting the other man one last time. Every word he read was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation of the life I thought we had. He was reading the unedited, ugly reality that my mind had so carefully cut out and thrown away. I saw his face twist in pain as he read the words of the 2-0-year-old girl. And he aimed all that pain at the 6-0-year-old woman standing in front of him. Watching him, I finally understood. He wasn't just mad about an affair that happened decades ago. He was mourning. He was mourning the 34 years he believed he was married to one woman, only to find out she was someone else entirely. In his eyes, our entire life was built on a lie I told on a crackly phone line from South America. But he doesn't understand. I didn't lie. I times forgot, asterisk. My mind, in an act of self-preservation I didn't even know was happening, protected me. It protected times us, asterisk. It buried the details that would have destroyed us before we even started. It built a more palatable history, a simpler story, and I lived inside that story so completely that I forgot it wasn't the absolute truth. The person who wrote those things was a ghost. I'd spent my whole adult life making sure I was nothing like her. The argument that followed downstairs was the worst of our lives. He kept shouting, "Why? Why would you lie to me for all these years?" And all I could say was, I didn't remember. It sounded like such a pathetic excuse even to my own ears. How could a person forget something so big? But I had. I had packed her away, that weak, selfish girl, and slammed the door. After that day, the silence in our house was deafening. We slept in separate rooms. We were like two strangers living together, moving around each other, careful not to touch. I tried to talk to him to explain, but he would just look at me with this hollowed-out expression. He was looking right through me at the ghost from the diaries. He started questioning everything. Our wedding anniversary. Were you thinking of him then, a vacation we took? Was that a happy memory, or were you just pretending? Every good moment we'd ever had was now tainted suspect. I was watching our entire history crumble to dust in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I tried to apologize. I told him I was sorry for the pain I caused for what that girl did so long ago. But it wasn't enough. He didn't want an apology from me, the woman he'd been married to for 34 years. He wanted an apology for the lie, for the deception. And how can I apologize for a lie I didn't even know I was telling? About 6 months after he found the diaries, he told me he wanted a divorce. He said he couldn't live with a stranger. He said he didn't know who I was anymore. That was the moment my heart truly broke. Not in the attic, but right there in our kitchen, with the evening sun coming through the window, making everything look warm and normal when our world was ending. He says I stole his choice. That if he had known the whole truth back in 1984, he might have made a different decision. Maybe he would have. But that young, scared girl in a foreign country made the only choice she knew how to make. She chose the future she wanted more than anything. She chose times him asterisk. She clung to the one good, stable thing in her life and buried the mess she'd made to keep it. It wasn't malicious. It was survival. Now I'm sitting in an apartment that doesn't feel like home, surrounded by boxes from a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. He's still in the house we built together. Sometimes I let myself believe that he'll say he understands. That he realizes the 34 years of love, laughter, and life we shared are more real than the scribblings of a confused girl from half a lifetime ago. But I don't think he will. He's in love with the memory of a marriage, and he's angry at a ghost. I'm the one who's still here. I love him. I love the man he is, and I love the life we had. I just don't know how to make him see that I'm not the villain in those pages anymore. I haven't been for a very, very long time.
Story 8.
I've seen what my ex-husband wrote online. I know he's getting a lot of support, a lot of people telling him how strong he is for what he did. And I guess from his point of view, he's the perfect victim. He was the perfect husband after all. On paper, he did everything right. Our marriage looked like a movie. He was always planning things, always surprising me. A weekend trip he'd booked months ago, a fancy dinner at a restaurant I'd mentioned once, a little bracelet left on my pillow just because it was a Tuesday. In the beginning, it was amazing. I felt so loved, so seen. But after 6 years, the grand gestures started to feel hollow. It was like he was a director and I was his lead actress. My only job was to be happy, to be grateful, to applaud his performance as the perfect husband. The loneliness was the worst part. It sounds crazy, right? How can you be lonely when your husband is so attentive? But it was like living in a beautiful, empty house. All my friends were his friends. My hobbies had become his hobbies. My whole life was just an extension of his. A few months ago, I finally broke down and told him how I felt. I told him I had no one, that my world felt so small. He was, of course, super supportive. He told me to find a hobby, join a club. For him, it was another problem to solve, another box to check off on his list of being a good husband. So I did. I joined a local meetup group for board game nights. It was the first thing I had done just for myself in years. And it was incredible. I met people who didn't know me as his wife. They just knew me. I could be goofy, I could be bad at a game, I could just be. And nobody was judging my performance. That's where I met Mark. It wasn't some dramatic love at first sight thing. It was just easy. We liked the same dumb sci-fi movies. We had the same stupid sense of humor. Talking to him felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. He saw me, the actual person, not the role I was playing at home. Back home, my new life became a problem. My husband's support quickly turned into suspicion. A text message would make him ask, "Who's that?" with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. If I was a few minutes late coming home from a meetup, I'd get a gentle, worried interrogation about where I was. He admitted he was jealous, but he said it in a way that made it my problem to manage. His trust wasn't a given. It was something I had to earn back every single day, and the cage he was building around me felt like it was getting smaller and smaller. It got to the point where I couldn't even meet a friend for coffee without it turning into a huge emotional drama about his anxiety. He'd be supportive to my face, but then I'd have to spend hours reassuring him that nothing was going on. It was exhausting. So one Saturday I lied. It was such a small, stupid lie. I told him I was going into town to look for a birthday present for my niece. Really, I was just going to Mark's house to play a new board game he'd bought. I just wanted 2 hours of peace. 2 hours where I didn't have to manage someone else's feelings. Of course, that's not what happened. He must have been watching the clock. He must have known exactly how long it would take me to get to town and back. When I didn't answer a text right away, he panicked. He drove to Mark's house. I don't know how he even knew the address. He just sat in his car and watched my car parked in the driveway. When I got home, he was a complete wreck. He was crying, shaking, telling me he thought I was dead in a ditch. Then the questions started. When he finally told me he'd driven to Mark's, my blood ran cold. I tried to explain. I told him the only reason I lied was because I knew he would react exactly like this. That his jealousy made it impossible to tell the truth. He called it gaslighting. I was trying to preserve my own sanity, and he twisted it into me being a manipulator. That was the night I knew it was over. He wasn't seeing a wife who was suffocating. He was seeing an enemy who had betrayed him. After that day, the house was unbearable. It was a prison of silent suspicion. My phone became a weapon. Every time it buzzed, he would flinch. My absences weren't just me being out. They were evidence of my crimes. Mark's house was the only place I could breathe. He was the only person I could talk to who didn't look at me like I was a villain. What happened between us wasn't planned. It was just a result of everything else. It was a hand to hold when I felt like I was drowning. It was comfort and understanding and a connection I was absolutely starved for at home. It was a mistake, a foolish, desperate escape, but it happened. My sister knew. She'd been listening to me cry on the phone for months about how trapped I felt. She never said anything to my husband because it wasn't her story to tell. It was my mess. Christmas felt like the final test. I really did try to make it work. I suggested we have our own special Christmas on the 23rd and 24th, just the two of us. We could exchange gifts, cook together, and try to find a little bit of what we used to have. The 2 days were nice, but it was all an act. We were two actors playing the roles of a happy couple, and we were both exhausted. On Christmas Eve, after we'd opened our last gifts, I couldn't do it anymore. I told him I was going over to my sister's for a bit. It was another lie. I couldn't spend one more minute walking on eggshells, pretending everything was okay in our perfect little house. I drove to Mark's. It wasn't about choosing him over my husband. It was about choosing to stop pretending, even if just for one night. We ordered a pizza and put on an old Christmas movie. For a few hours, I almost felt normal. We talked, we laughed. It was quiet, it was peaceful. Around 11 p.m., my phone, which I'd put on silent on the counter, lit up. I glanced over and saw his name on the screen. He was calling. I felt my stomach drop. Mark looked at me, his smile fading. "Everything okay?" he asked. I just shook my head and walked into the kitchen to answer it. "Hello." His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was cold. Completely empty. It was the voice of a man who had already made up his mind. "I know where you are," he said. It wasn't a question. My heart hammered in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked, but my voice was weak. The lie died before it even left my lips. "Don't," he said. "Just don't. I've been on the computer. Our computer." And then I knew. A few weeks ago, my phone had been acting up, and I downloaded my WhatsApp archive to my Gmail so I could read it on the desktop. It was such a stupid, careless thing to do. I'd forgotten all about it. He must have found it. He must have read everything. He started listing things off like a lawyer in a courtroom. The messages. All of them. The ones where you tell him you love him. The ones where you talk about me. He paused and I could hear him take a sharp breath. I saw your location history. I know all the times you lied. I even saw the email receipt for the watch you bought him for Christmas. The one you told me was for your dad. There was nothing to say. There were no excuses. The little lies and the big ones had all tangled together into this one giant, ugly truth. He had all the evidence he needed. He had his story, and it was a simple one. I was the villain. I know, I whispered. It was all I could say. You know, he repeated, his voice cracking just a little. That's it. After 6 years, all you have to say is, I know. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that he'd pushed me to this, that his perfect, suffocating love had left me no air to breathe. I wanted to tell him about the nights I cried myself to sleep because I was so crushingly lonely right next to him. But what was the point? He wasn't listening. He was just confirming what he already believed. My words would just be more gaslighting to him. My pain would just be an excuse. It's over, he said, his voice flat again. I'm done. I don't ever want to see you again. When you get back, your things will be packed. He hung up. I stood there in Mark's kitchen phone in my hand, staring at the wall. The silence was deafening. The cheesy Christmas movie was still playing in the other room. Mark came in and saw my face. He didn't have to ask what happened. He just put his arms around me, but I felt a million miles away. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I didn't want to blow up my life. I just wanted to feel like a real person again. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I went to my sister's house, the place I should have gone in the first place. I spent Christmas Day on her couch, numb, while her kids opened their presents. The next day, I got a text from my next-door neighbor. Are you okay? There are bags all over your front garden. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just packed my things, he'd thrown them out. I drove over my sister in the car with me for support. And there it was. My life. My clothes, my books, my photos, all stuffed into black garbage bags and piled up on the damp grass for the whole world to see. It was a final public performance. It was him showing everyone what a good wronged man he was and what a piece of trash I was. I just stood on the pavement and cried. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was pure cruelty. This was him trying to humiliate me into nothing. In the days that followed, I tried to talk to him. I sent texts. I sent emails. I wasn't begging for him to take me back. I knew that was over, and honestly, I didn't want it anymore. I just wanted him to face me. I wanted a real conversation, not a cold execution over the phone. I wanted him to yell at me, to get angry, to treat me like a person who had hurt him, not like a problem he had erased. I wanted him to understand just for a second that a marriage doesn't just break overnight. It cracks slowly under the weight of 1,000 tiny moments of loneliness and misunderstanding. I wanted him to know that the woman he married was still in there somewhere, buried under years of trying to be the perfect wife he demanded. He never replied. The silence was his final word. It allowed him to keep his perfect story intact. Now I see his post online. I see the comments praising his dignity and strength for cutting me out so cleanly. They don't see the man whose jealousy was a prison. They don't see the man whose love was conditional on me playing a role. They see the perfect husband who got cheated on by a horrible wife. And he's letting them? He's soaking it all in. I'm not going to pretend I'm innocent. I lied. I had an affair. I broke his heart, and I will have to live with that forever. But I am not the monster he has made me out to be. I am a woman who was suffocating and made a desperate, stupid, and selfish choice to be able to breathe again. He can have his story. He can have his internet supporters and their sympathy. He can be the perfect victim, just like he was the perfect husband. It's clear to me now that he always needed an audience more than he ever needed a wife.
Story 9.
I guess I'm the villain in this story. That's how my husband tells it anyway. And maybe he's right. But I need you to understand that before all this, my life felt like a long, quiet hallway with beige walls and no doors. My husband, let's call him Mark, is a good man. He's kind, he's a great stepdad to my daughter, and he's stable in a way I desperately needed when I met him. My first husband was a serial cheater. I'm not talking one mistake. I'm talking about a man who had entire other lives I knew nothing about. When that marriage blew up, it almost took me with it. During that awful time, the only thing that kept me sane was writing. I had an online writing partner, Chris. We were building a fantasy world, a whole universe from scratch. He was on the other side of the country, but he felt closer to me than the man sleeping in my bed. He saw my mind, the weird creative parts, and he thought they were brilliant. When I finally left my ex, I leaned on Chris. We crossed a line. It was messy and desperate, and it became physical. He was so sure about us that he moved all the way across the country to be with me. But I was a wreck. My daughter was traumatized. I was broke, and I couldn't handle the intensity of what we had. I needed boring. I needed safe. So I broke his heart. I sent him back home and told him we couldn't speak again. I chose the beige hallway and I met Mark. For years I told myself I was happy. I convinced myself that the absence of pain was the same thing as joy. Then about 6 months ago, I got an email. It was from Chris. After all these years, he'd taken our book, our world, and he'd gotten it published. He sent me a copy. Holding it in my hands felt, I can't even describe it. It was like seeing a ghost of me, the person I used to be. The story was different, names were changed, but I could feel my DNA on every page. He wanted to talk about a comic book adaptation, said he couldn't do it without me. Mark saw how excited I was. He was happy for me in his way. That's great, honey, a little hobby for you. A hobby. He had no idea this was the single most important thing I had ever created in my life. Talking to Chris again felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for 10 years. The old energy was just there. Instantly. We texted and emailed constantly. I started deleting the messages. Not because I was already cheating, but because I couldn't stand the idea of Mark reading them. He wouldn't get it. He'd see our shorthand, our jokes about characters, our creative passion, and he would just see a man and a woman talking too much. That world was ours, and I felt fiercely protective of it. A few weeks later, Chris said he had meetings in my city and was flying in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I had to see him. My brother was flying home from a business trip that same day, so the lie was easy. I told Mark I was going to the airport to get my brother. The whole drive there, my hands were shaking. I felt sick with guilt, but also dizzy with a feeling I hadn't felt in a decade. Anticipation. The second I saw him standing at arrivals, it was like no time had passed. We didn't even make it out of the airport parking lot. We just looked at each other, and it was a done deal. The 20-minute drive to his hotel was a blur. It wasn't a decision to betray my husband. It was gravity. It was me coming home to myself. Later, we were lying in his hotel bed, and he laughed. He said, "Yeah, we're just friends. I don't see you in 8 years, and I'm inside you 20 minutes off the plane. Best friends, maybe." He got it. He understood the beautiful, terrible truth of us. We were just inevitable. After he left, the beige hallway felt more like a prison cell. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unfeel what I'd felt with him. We needed more time. A weekend at least. That's when we came up with the Vegas plan. I told Mark my company was sending me to a mandatory conference. I booked a flight, created a fake itinerary, and even had Chris help me Photoshop some pictures of me in front of a fake Vegas backdrop that I could send from my trip. It was crazy, all of it. The lies felt heavy, but the thought of a whole weekend of being that other woman, the writer, the one who felt seen and alive, it felt worth any price. I'm supposed to leave in 2 weeks. I've been so careful using a private browser, deleting everything. But something's changed in the last few days. Mark is quiet. Too quiet. He watches me when he thinks I'm not looking. The way he looks at me isn't angry, not yet. It's calculating. He's always been so open, so predictable, but now there's something sealed off behind his eyes. Last night I was on my laptop finalizing the fake hotel confirmation for my conference, and he walked into the room. I slammed the laptop shut a little too fast. He just stood in the doorway and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. My blood ran cold. He knows. I don't know how, but I know he knows something. The 2 weeks leading up to my trip were the worst of my life. The house was quiet, but it was a heavy, suffocating quiet, like the air before a tornado. Mark was a ghost. He'd be there physically, but his eyes would look right through me. He'd ask about my conference with this polite, dead voice. "Did you finish your presentation, honey?" Or, "Don't forget to pack a swimsuit for the hotel pool." Every question was a little twist of the knife. I felt like a bug under a microscope. I wanted to call it off. A dozen times a day I'd have the words on my tongue, "Mark, we need to talk." But I couldn't. What would I even say? And a part of me, the desperate, selfish part, still clung to the idea of Vegas. I'd message Chris short, paranoid texts. "Something is wrong here," I wrote. "He knows." Chris tried to be reassuring, telling me I was just feeling guilty, that I should hold it together because we were so close. But I knew. That cold smile had been a death sentence. The night before I was supposed to leave, I was standing in our bedroom folding a shirt into my suitcase. My hands were trembling. I was just going through the motions like an actor in a play where I'd forgotten all my lines. Mark walked in and stood in the doorway just like he had the other night. He was holding my phone. My heart didn't just drop, it evaporated. "You can stop packing," he said. His voice was calm. It was the calmest I had ever heard him, and it was the most terrifying sound in the world. I tried to play dumb. "What do you mean? My flight is at 7 a.m. He took a step into the room and held up my phone. "I mean, the conference in Vegas is canceled. It was never happening in the first place, was it?" I just stared at him, my mouth dry. I couldn't form a word. "I hired someone," he said, his voice flat like he was reading a grocery list. "After I saw you slam your laptop shut. A guy who specializes in data recovery. It's amazing what you can find even after it's been deleted. Texts, emails, the photoshops of you in front of the Bellagio, the hotel reservation for 2 at the Aria. All of it?" He tossed the phone onto the bed. It landed softly on the pile of clothes. He even got the messages from 8 years ago. The ones from before you sent him away. Before you met me. The room started to spin. "Mark." "Don't," he snapped, and the calm finally broke. For a second I saw a flash of pure rage in his eyes. "Don't you dare try to explain it to me. I read it all. Every I miss you. Every I can't wait. I read about the airport. About how you couldn't even wait 20 minutes to F times CK him in his hotel room. It wasn't like that. The words burst out of me, desperate and weak. You don't understand. It wasn't just about sex. That book, it was my life. He was my partner. He saw a part of me that you never have." I was trying to make him understand the ghost, the beige hallway, the feeling of being suffocated. I told him how I'd felt dead for years, how talking to Chris was like breathing again. I was pleading, trying to explain that the woman he married was just a fraction of who I really was. He just stared at me. Then he started to laugh. It was a horrible, bitter sound. "So that's your excuse. You had to cheat on me to feel creative. You had to destroy our family to finish your little hobby project." He took another step closer, his face contorted. "You know who you sound like. You sound exactly like him, your first husband, the man who ruined you. All his excuses, all his lies about needing something more. You've become the one thing you always swore you hated. That was it. That was the kill shot." He didn't just expose my affair. He took the one true thing I had, my creative soul, and he smeared it in the most disgusting, ordinary mud he could find. He made it cheap. He made it dirty. He saw the look on my face, and it gave me that smile again. The cold, dead one, but this time it was filled with a deep, satisfying hatred. "I want you to unpack your suitcase," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I want you to put everything back exactly where it was. Then we're going to go on living our life. You're going to be a wife to me and a mother to your daughter, and this other person you think you are, she's gone." And that was it. There was no big fight where we threw things. There was no dramatic exit. He just laid out the terms of my surrender. It's been a week. I canceled the trip. I sent Chris a single text. He knows everything. "Don't contact me again." He tried to call, but I blocked his number. It was over. The portal to that other world was sealed shut. Now my life is the quiet hallway again, but it's different. Before there was a ghost in it, a memory of who I could be. Now there's nothing. Mark killed her. He walks around this house like a warden, his kindness a weapon, his stability a cage. He makes me dinner. He asks about my day. And every time he looks at me, I know he's enjoying his victory. He thinks he's saved our marriage. He thinks he's won. He has no idea what he's done. He didn't just stop an affair. He took the last vibrant, colorful part of my soul, the part that wrote stories and dreamed of other worlds, and he crushed it under his heel. He thinks he lost a wife for a few weeks and got her back. He doesn't understand that I've lost myself forever.
Story teen.
I know what you've heard. You've probably heard his side of the story, the one where he's the victim, the 5-star boyfriend who was betrayed by his cheating girlfriend. That's how he frames everything. It's always about his status, his ranking. When I first got with him, it felt less like falling in love and more like being the first-round draft pick. He was the star basketball player. I was the track girl. We looked good on paper, perfect for Instagram, the campus power couple. I was his trophy, and for a while I didn't mind being on his shelf. It was shiny up there. The problem with being a trophy is that you just sit there and collect dust. His life was a whirlwind of travel, games, parties, and adoration. My life was his big empty apartment. He'd be gone for days at a time, flying to play in some other state, and I'd be left behind surrounded by his expensive sneakers and championship photos. The silence in that place was deafening. I'd try to call, and he'd text back hours later, team meeting. In the gym, can't talk. I started to feel invisible. He calls me insecure. He's right. I was. I was a wreck. How could I not be? He had this confidence that the whole world was his for the taking, and women were a part of that world. They were everywhere in his DMs, at his games, at parties we went to. I saw the way they looked at him, and I saw that he never discouraged it. I became that girl, the one who checks her boyfriend's phone when he's in the shower. I hated myself for it, but the fear of what I might find was less painful than the constant gnawing uncertainty. The loneliness started to feel like a sickness. It was an ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. I just wanted to feel wanted by someone who was actually there. So I did something stupid. I reached out to people who gave me attention. My ex, a guy from one of my classes. It was a pattern of self-destruction. It wasn't love, it wasn't even really about sex. It was just a desperate, pathetic attempt to feel like I existed, to get a reaction from someone, anyone, when the person who was supposed to be my world made me feel like a ghost. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong. It was a horrible, selfish mistake that I will regret for the rest of my life. But it didn't come from nowhere. It came from a place of deep hurt and isolation. The period tracking app is the part that makes everyone cringe. I get it. It sounds cold and calculated. But for me as an athlete, it was just data. My cycle was all over the place from the stress of training, so my coach had me track everything. Everything. Mood, sleep, diet, physical activity. It was just another box to check. The notes I made were my weird, private way of processing my own meltdown. It was like a diary. Nobody was ever supposed to see a list of my own terrible choices. I wasn't proud of it. I was just documenting the mess I was making of my life. The night it all blew up was his teammate's birthday. For a few hours, things felt perfect. We were drinking, dancing, laughing. I felt like his girlfriend again, not just the girl waiting for him at home. We went back to his place and had sex. It was messy and drunken and real. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. That feeling didn't last long. Around 5 a.m., he shook me awake. He was still drunk, and his words were slurred. "Hey," he mumbled, "put it in your calendar." I was half asleep and confused, but I did what he asked. I unlocked my phone, opened the app, and handed it to him before I passed right back out. I trusted him. I gave him the unlocked phone, the keys to my entire stupid secret life, and went back to sleep. When I woke up a few hours later, the space next to me was cold. He was gone. I figured he'd gone to get breakfast or something. Then I heard the front door slam open. It wasn't him. It was his roommate, Bono, a 7-foot-tall mountain of a man from Russia. He stormed into the bedroom, his face red with anger. He didn't even say hello. He just pointed a huge finger at me and yelled, "Yo, B, you cheated on OP." His accent made it sound even more terrifying. I couldn't even speak. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my throat. Before I could answer, he was screaming, "Get your shit, get out now." I was being thrown out of my home by a man I barely knew. I tried to ask where OP was if I could just talk to him, but Bono just kept yelling for me to get out. I grabbed what I could, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my bag, and I ran out of there, while he stood in the doorway watching me like I was garbage. My phone started buzzing in my hand. It was a string of texts from him, cold, short sentences. I saw everything. I read the notes. "We're done. Don't contact me." I called him over and over, but he sent every call to voicemail. I texted him, begging him to just talk to me, to let me explain. It was his birthday that night, and everyone was going to a big party for him. I told him I needed to see him, that I'd come to the party just to talk for 5 minutes. He accuses me of only caring about my reputation, but that's not true. I didn't care who saw me. I just felt like if I could see him, look him in the eyes, and tell him how sorry I was, we could fix it. I thought our love was bigger than my mistake. He finally replied, "Don't you dare show your face at my party." That was the last thing he ever said to me directly. But he wasn't done. Not even close. The next few days were quiet. A strange, heavy silence. I didn't hear from him, but I felt him everywhere. It started at track practice. Usually my relay team was my rock. We were 4 girls who trained together, won together, and lost together. We were a unit. But that Monday, something was different. They wouldn't look at me. When I tried to talk to them during warm-ups, they gave one-word answers and quickly turned away. My best friend on the team, Sarah, just stared straight ahead when I sat next to her, her jaw tight. I knew something was wrong. I just had no idea how wrong it was about to get. The whispers started the next day. I'd walk into the locker room and conversations would stop. People would literally turn their backs on me. My relay team was my entire world, and they had cut me out completely. I cornered Sarah after practice, grabbing her arm as she tried to rush past me. "What is going on?" I begged her. "Just talk to me, please." She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the track and mumbled, "I can't." "Can't what, Sarah? You're my best friend." That's when she finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and anger. "He told me everything, Lisa. He came over the night he found out. He was so hurt." My stomach dropped. He came over to your place. She nodded, finally breaking. Tears streamed down her face. He was a mess. We talked for hours. One thing led to another. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I slept with him. The world went fuzzy. My best friend. My teammate. It felt like a punch to the gut, but that was only the beginning. It wasn't just Sarah. Over the next week, the whole horrifying picture came into focus. He hadn't just slept with Sarah. He had systematically worked his way through our entire 4x4 relay team. The other two girls, Ashley and Megan, had both fallen for the same story. The heartbroken superstar needing comfort. He had targeted the 4 people closest to me, my support system, and turned them against me and against each other. It wasn't revenge. It was a psychological warfare campaign. The team didn't just get weird. It imploded. We went from being championship contenders to a group of girls who couldn't even stand in the same room. Practices were a nightmare of accusations and angry glares. Our coach tried to intervene, but the damage was done. He had taken the one thing that was mine, my sport, my team, and burned it to the ground. And he did it all with a smile on his face. His giant smug face was plastered on posters all over campus for the basketball season. I couldn't escape him. He was everywhere, this smiling hero, while I was the villain who had destroyed everything. I couldn't handle it. The public humiliation, losing all my friends, my sport falling apart. It was a constant crushing weight. I stopped eating. I couldn't sleep. The anxiety was so bad I would throw up before going to class. I started having dark thoughts, thinking that maybe it would be easier if I just wasn't here anymore. It got so bad that my parents had to come get me. I took a medical leave from school. I had failed at everything. He had won. I thought going home would be a safe place to heal. I was wrong. A few weeks after I got back, he called my dad. Not me, my dad. He told him he had a few bags of my things and that he'd leave them on our porch. My dad brought them inside and I started unpacking, just wanting to get it over with. My clothes were all mixed up with other things. A lacy black bra that wasn't mine. A pair of panties I recognized as Sarah's. A necklace I'd seen Ashley wear. It was a sick collection of trophies from his conquests, a final disgusting message sent right to my family's home. He was telling me that he didn't just break up with me, he owned me, he owned my friends, he owned my whole world. Years went by. It was a long, hard road. I got therapy. I finished my degree at a different school. I slowly put the pieces of myself back together. He was a scar, but one that had faded. One day, on a stupid impulse, I sent him a message. I don't even know why. I think I just wanted to see if the monster was still a monster. To my shock, he replied. He was kind, apologetic. He said he was a different person now, that he was ashamed of how he'd acted. He told me he was moving back to the States from where he was playing in Central America, and that maybe we could get a coffee and find some closure. That hope, that stupid little flicker of hope, flared up inside me. Maybe he had grown up. Maybe we both had. He came to visit me. For 2 days it was like a dream. He was charming, attentive, and sorry. He looked me in the eyes and told me he had never stopped loving me, that I was the one who got away. We talked for hours, we laughed, and yes, we slept together. It felt like we were healing something that had been broken for a long, long time. I let myself believe him. I let my guard down completely. He was supposed to stay for the week. On the third morning I woke up and he was gone. His bags were gone. There was no note. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. I checked his social media. He had blocked me. Blocked me on everything. A friend of a friend told me he'd posted a picture from the airport. He had flown back that morning without a single word. That's when I finally understood. This was never about closure. It wasn't about him being a better man. It was the final move in a game only he was playing. He needed to prove he could still have me, that he could still make me fall just so he could be the one to walk away this time. He needed to have the last word. He loves to tell the story about how my cheating unleashed his rage. But that's a lie. The darkness, the cruelty, the need to dominate and destroy that was always inside him. My mistake didn't create the monster, it just gave him an excuse to let it out of its cage. He might have been hurt by what I did, but my actions were a cry for help from a girl who felt invisible. His were the calculated choices of a man who needed to prove he could burn a woman's entire life to the ground and walk away without a scratch. I survived him. That's my story.
Story 11.
My husband Mark thinks I cheated on him. He's probably telling his friends and family that I had an affair, and that's why he's filing for divorce. It's a simple, clean story, and it makes him the good guy. The truth is, our marriage was a corpse long before I ever sent a text message to another man. I was just the one who finally got tired of pretending to be in mourning. For the last 10 years, we've been roommates. Not even good roommates, just two people who split the bills and shared a mortgage. We didn't talk, not really. Our conversations were about logistics. Who's picking up the kids? Did you remember to take the trash out? The roof is going to need replacing in a few years. I felt like another item on his household checklist. Fix the gutters, pay the property taxes, make sure the wife is functioning. He's a good man in the way people describe a reliable car. He starts every morning, he doesn't break down, he gets you from A to B, but there's no joy in it. He never looked at me like he actually times wanted times me. He just looked at me like he was used to me being there. The silence was the worst part. We could sit in the same room for hours and not say a word. I'd try, I really would. I'd ask about his day and he'd say, fine. I'd try to tell him a funny story and he'd give me a tight little smile while staring at the TV. It was like shouting into a void. After a while, you just stop shouting. You start to believe you don't have a voice. We went to counseling once a few years ago. It was my idea, of course. For him, it was just another problem to solve. He sat there, answered the therapist's questions like he was on a job interview, and waited for her to give him a list of instructions to fix me. He never understood that it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about feeling something. We stopped going after a few sessions. It was a waste of money, he said. I was so lonely I thought it was going to physically kill me. You can't understand that kind of loneliness unless you've lived it, sleeping next to someone every night and feeling like you're on a different planet. Then I met Jack at my new job. It wasn't some grand romance. It was just easy. We were working on a project together and he made a stupid joke. I laughed a real laugh and it felt like a muscle I hadn't used in years. We started talking more at work, and then it turned into texting. It was nothing serious. We'd send memes, complain about our boss, talk about what we were watching on TV. He was just a friend. But he was a friend who listened. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. When I said something I thought was clever, he'd text back LOL or tell me I was funny. It was a tiny little spark of light in the gray, suffocating fog of my home life. Was it flirty sometimes? I guess in a harmless way. It was fun. It was a reminder that I was still a person. I wasn't just a mom, a wife, a household manager. I was someone who could be interesting and witty. I was alive. Of course, Mark found out. And he didn't find out because I told him, which I should have. He found out because he waited until I was asleep and went through my phone. He didn't come to me and say, "Hey, I'm feeling insecure," or "I'm worried about us." He went behind my back like a spy, looking for evidence to prove his worst fears. The confrontation was awful. He didn't ask me why. He didn't ask if I was unhappy. He just held up the phone like a prosecutor revealing the murder weapon. He accused me of sleeping with Jack, of planning to leave him. His paranoia was suffocating. So I did something stupid. I panicked. He was watching my phone like a hawk, and every notification from Jack Harkness sent him into a rage. I changed Jack's name in my contacts to a woman's name. I just wanted to stop the constant third degree. I also deleted some of our conversations. Not because there was anything incriminating in them, but because I knew Mark would twist every single word. There was one text Jack sent on Thanksgiving when I was stressing about the turkey. I sent him a picture of my messy kitchen, and he wrote back, "That level of turkey prep is so hot." Jack's a goofy guy. He says weird stuff like that. To Mark, it was a confession of a passionate affair. I was just trying to protect a simple friendship from my husband's insane jealousy. I was trying to keep that one small, happy part of my life for myself. That was the real start of the war. My phone became the battlefield. He demanded I give him the passcode and allow him unrestricted access to everything: my texts, my emails, my social media. He wanted to read every word I typed to anyone. He said it was the only way he could ever trust me again. But it wasn't about trust. It was about control. It was about him punishing me for finding a moment of happiness outside of him. I refused. That phone, that little bit of privacy, was the only thing I had left that was mine. It wasn't about Jack anymore. It was about me refusing to be treated like a prisoner in my own life. I told him no. I told him he needed to get help for his paranoia and his insecurity, and that my privacy wasn't the price for his peace of mind. The fights got worse. He'd follow me from room to room, demanding the phone, his voice getting louder and colder. Last night was the worst it's ever been. I told him for what felt like the 100th time that he was not going to get my passcode. I was done being interrogated. "This isn't about the phone, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about you never seeing me, and I'm not going to let you control me now." He just stopped. He wasn't yelling anymore. All the rage drained from his face and was replaced by something else, something terrifyingly calm. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years. And all I saw was ice. "You're right," he said, his voice flat. "It isn't about the phone." He picked up his own phone from the counter. "There are other ways to find out what's going on." I watched him as he tapped on his screen, his thumb moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in him for years. My stomach twisted. He wasn't searching for information. He was searching for a person. It took me a second to realize what he was doing. He was on social media looking for Jack. Not Jack, but Jack's wife. He was going to find her. He was going to blow everything up. "Mark, don't," I whispered, a real primal fear cutting through my anger. "Please. You have no idea what you're doing." He didn't look up from his phone. "I know exactly what I'm doing." "You wanted to hide things. Fine. Let's bring it all into the light." He found her profile. I saw a picture of her and Jack with their 2 kids at a pumpkin patch. A happy family. A normal family. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't about us anymore. He was pulling innocent people into his war. "She has nothing to do with this," I pleaded, taking a step towards him. "This is between you and me." He finally looked at me and his eyes were completely empty. "You made it about them when you started texting her husband behind my back." He tapped out a message, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't know what he wrote, but I could imagine. Something cold and factual, designed for maximum damage. Asterisk. "Your husband has been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. You should check his phone." Asterisk. He hit send, then set his phone down on the counter with a quiet final click. He had just dropped a bomb, and now he was waiting for it to go off. It didn't take long, maybe 15 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was Jack. I answered, my hand shaking. "What the hell did you do?" he whispered, his voice frantic. "My wife is losing her mind. She just got a message from your husband. He sent her screenshots." "Screenshots, you idiot. Why didn't you delete everything?" The blood drained from my face. Screenshots. Mark hadn't just found the text. He had documented them. The goofy joke about the turkey, the late-night complaints about work. He'd saved them like ammunition. He'd been preparing for this. "I'm so sorry, Jack," I stammered. "I had no idea he would." "My life is blowing up right now because of you," he cut me off, his voice cracking. "I can't talk to you. Ever again. Lose my number." He hung up. And just like that, it was over. The one small friendship, the one little escape was gone. Erased. I stood in the kitchen, the silence rushing back in heavier and more menacing than ever before. Mark was watching me, his expression unreadable. "There," he said, as if he'd just finished a chore. "Now we know." "Know what, Mark?" I snapped, the shock finally giving way to a white-hot fury. "What do we know?" "That you're cruel enough to ruin someone's life just to prove a point. That you're a coward who attacks other people because you can't handle your own feelings." He didn't even flinch. I did what I had to do. "You refused to be honest with me." It was his new mantra. He wasn't a paranoid, controlling husband. He was a rational man forced into a corner. He had calmly and logically detonated our lives, and now he was standing back pretending to be a victim of the blast. The next few days were a special kind of hell. We lived in the same house but didn't speak. The air was thick with hate. I felt like I was suffocating. I went to work and pretended everything was fine, terrified that at any moment HR would call me into an office. I imagined the whispers. Jack and I worked in the same department. Mark hadn't just destroyed a friendship, he'd jeopardized my career. All to win a fight I didn't even know we were having. A week later, I came home to an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. It wasn't sealed. Inside were divorce papers. He hadn't even had the decency to hand them to me to look me in the eye. It was just another piece of administrative work left for me to handle. Underneath the papers was a sticky note in his neat block handwriting. Asterisk. I've moved some things to the guest room. I'll be staying there until we sort this out. I think it's for the best. Asterisk. For the best. After 17 years of marriage, this is how it ended. With a stack of legal documents and a note like he was reminding me to pick up milk. He's telling people I'm showing my true colors now. He's right about that. He is finally seeing them. He's seen the color of rage from a woman who screamed for his attention for a decade only to be met with silence. He's seeing the pain of a wife who was treated like a faulty appliance that needed to be managed, not a person who needed to be loved. And he's seeing the fury of a human being whose entire world he methodically set on fire just to prove he was right all along. He tells his story and it's neat and tidy. The wife had an emotional affair, she lied and hid it, and the heartbroken husband had no choice but to end the marriage. But his story leaves out the years of crushing loneliness. It leaves out the suffocating quiet of a home where no one ever really talked. It leaves out a man who could diagnose a problem with the roof from a single water stain, but couldn't see that his own wife was drowning right in front of him. He thinks this was all about Jack. He honestly believes that if he had just gotten into my phone and read all my messages, he could have fixed the problem. He could have eliminated the threat and things would have gone back to normal. He never understood. It was never about Jack. It was about the silence he left, the void he created. Jack didn't break our marriage. He just happened to be the person who showed me what it felt like to not be alone. And for that, Mark could never forgive me. It was always about him. It was always about him.
Story 12.
I'm pretty sure my husband has written about me online. So if you've read a story about a crazy pregnant wife who threw a fork at her loving, patient husband, then hi, it's me. I'm the monster. But I guess he forgot to mention how he created me. When we were dating, he was my everything. Not in a clingy, weird way, but in a way that made me feel totally safe. He saw me. When I was sad, he knew why before I did. When we argued, he'd sit down, look me right in the eye, and we would talk it out. Sometimes for hours. It didn't matter how mad we were. We always found our way back to each other. I never once felt like he was going to leave me. The wedding was supposed to be the start of forever. For me, it was the start of watching my husband slowly disappear. The arguments started becoming more frequent, which is normal, I guess. But the way he handled them changed completely. He just stopped. He would sit on the couch, his face a total blank, and just wait for me to run out of steam. He called it de-escalating. He said he was trying not to make things worse. What it felt like was being locked in a room by myself. He was right there, but he was gone. I was fighting with a ghost. He would say, "Okay, I'm sorry," with this dead look in his eyes, not because he was sorry, but because he just wanted the noise to stop. Every empty apology felt like a tiny little rejection, a confirmation that I was just an annoyance he had to manage. When I found out I was pregnant, I cried. Not just because I was happy, but because I was so relieved. I thought, this will fix it. This will bring him back. A baby is real. It's permanent. It's a piece of both of us. He can't check out on this. He can't disappear on our child. And for a little while I was right. He was so happy. He held me and kissed my stomach, and for the first time in a long time I felt the man I married was actually in the room with me again. That feeling didn't last. Pregnancy wasn't some beautiful glowing experience for me. It was miserable. I was sick all the time. I couldn't sleep, and my body felt like it belonged to a stranger. On top of that, the depression I fought so hard to beat back when I was a teenager came roaring back. It felt like my own brain was attacking me and all the hormones were giving it extra ammunition. I've never felt so alone or out of control in my entire life. All I wanted was my husband. I just needed him to hold me to see I was struggling and to tell me we'd get through it. Instead, he pulled away even more. His disappearing act got worse. If I was too sick to do the dishes, the one dirty plate I left in the sink was proof that I was failing. If he came home and immediately put on his headphones to play video games, it felt like he was escaping to a world where I didn't exist. He had his escape, but I was trapped in this body with his screaming in my head, and I had nowhere to go. So I got louder. I know I did. I would yell, I would cry, I would beg him to just look times at me to talk to me. I just wanted a reaction. I wanted him to get angry, to fight back, to show me there was still someone in there who cared enough to argue. But I got nothing. Just the same placid, empty stare. I felt like I was drowning, and he was standing on the beach calmly watching the tide pull me under. The night of the fork incident, I can't even remember what the argument was about. It doesn't matter. It was the same argument we always had, me screaming to be seen and him sitting there like a stone statue. I was so desperate. I felt like I was invisible, like my voice wasn't making a sound. I needed to do something that would make a noise loud enough to break through the wall he had built around himself. I saw the fork on the end table next to me, and I just grabbed it and threw it in his direction. I wasn't trying to hit him, not really. I just needed to make something happen. It hit him on the cheek right below his eye. It left a small scratch. And for the first time in months, his expression changed. The blank look was gone. He looked at me and he was scared. Genuinely afraid. Of me. In that moment I saw what he saw, a monster. And a part of me just broke. After that he started actually leaving. He'd say, "I can't deal with this," and go to his parents' house for the night. Sometimes for 2 nights. He called it giving us space, but I knew what it was. He was practicing. He was trying on a new life without me in it. And it was getting more and more comfortable. The final nail in the coffin for me was when he sat me down a few weeks ago. He had this serious look on his face, and I thought, okay, this is it. He's going to talk to me. He's finally going to engage. Instead, he told me he thought I needed to see a psychiatrist. He didn't say, "I'm worried about us, maybe we should try therapy." He said, "You are broken and you need to go get fixed." He'd already decided I was the problem. My pain, my fear, my depression, it wasn't real to him. It was just a chemical imbalance that was making his life inconvenient. I told him to get out. I screamed it. It was the worst thing he could have possibly said. He left for his parents' place again after that fight. He's been there for 3 days. It's been quiet. Too quiet. I spent most of yesterday just crying, feeling so defeated. I have my regular OB appointment tomorrow morning. A few minutes ago, the receptionist from the doctor's office called to confirm the time. It was a normal call until the very end. She said, "Okay, see you tomorrow at 10, and doctor." Miller said to tell you she's looking forward to following up on the concerns your husband shared with her. I hung up the phone. For a few long seconds I didn't move. I just stood in the kitchen staring at the wall, the words echoing in my head. Asterisk. The concerns your husband shared with her. Asterisk. He went to my doctor. He went behind my back to the one person I am supposed to trust with my body and my baby, and painted me as a crazy person. The betrayal was so total, so complete, that it felt like ice water flooding my veins. This wasn't about concern. This was about building a case. All the little pieces clicked into place. His quiet detachment, his nights away, his suggestion, "I see a psychiatrist." He wasn't just avoiding fights. He was gathering evidence. He was laying the groundwork to leave me, and he was making sure everyone would be on his side when he did. The crazy pregnant wife and the poor long-suffering husband. My hands were shaking. I called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and cautious, the way you'd talk to a wild animal you don't want to startle. "Hey," he said. "Is everything okay?" "You need to come home," I said. My voice was flat. All the screaming had burned out of me. All that was left was this cold, hard stone in my chest. "We need to talk." He hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good idea right now. Things are pretty heated." "No, they're not," I said. "They're not heated at all. Just come get the rest of your things, and we'll talk." An hour later, he walked in. He had a couple of empty boxes with him. He didn't look at me, just started moving toward the bedroom. "The office called," I said. He froze. "My doctor's office. They called to confirm my appointment for tomorrow." He slowly turned to face me. He had his careful, neutral face on. "Okay." They said Dr. Miller was looking forward to following up on the concerns you shared with her. There it was. A flicker of panic in his eyes. He was caught. "I was just worried about you," he said, the words coming out practiced and smooth. "Your mood swings the anger." I thought she should know. "My mood swings," I repeated. The cold stone in my chest started to feel hot. "You mean my reaction to my husband completely disappearing? To him sitting there with dead eyes while I beg him to talk to me? That's what you were so worried about." "This is what I'm talking about," he said, holding up his hands like he was calming a horse. "You're escalating. I was trying to get you help." "No, you were trying to get me labeled," I shot back. "First you want me to see a psychiatrist to get medicated so I'll be quiet and convenient for you. When I say no, you go to my OBGYN to poison her against me." "What was your plan?" "To tell her I'm an unfit mother before the baby is even born. To build a case so you could take my child away from me." "That's ridiculous. I would never." "Wouldn't you?" I took a step closer. For the first time, he didn't back away. He just stood there, and the blankness, the emptiness I hated so much settled over his face again. He was checking out. Right in front of me. He was disappearing one last time. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice quiet. "Final? I'm done." My breath hitched. I knew what was coming, but hearing it was different. it was a physical blow. I want a divorce. There it was. The sentence I had spent the last year fighting against in the ugliest way I knew how. I had screamed, I had cried, I had thrown a fork, all to try and stop him from saying those 4 words. And here they were. All the fight just vanished. It was like a switch was flipped off inside me. I had been holding up this massive weight for so long, and I just let it go. It crashed down around me, and I didn't even have the energy to flinch. I just stood there in the wreckage. I must have looked strange because his expression changed from guarded to confused. He was expecting me to scream, to cry, to throw something else. But I had nothing left. He had won. The quiet he wanted so badly, he was finally going to get it. I just nodded. Okay. His face, if possible, went even more blank. This wasn't part of the script he'd practiced in his head. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, around our baby. You can get your stuff. I walked over to the armchair in the corner and sank into it. I watched him, this man who was my husband, as he moved silently through our apartment, a stranger packing up the ghost of a life we were supposed to have. He folded his clothes, packed his video game console, took his toothbrush from the bathroom. He worked with a quiet efficiency that told me he had been planning this for a long, long time. Every packed item was another shovel of dirt on the grave of our marriage. When he was done, he stood by the door with his 2 boxes. He looked at me, sitting in the chair. We'll have to talk about everything else. The logistics, he said. Logistics. That's what we were now. A set of problems to be solved. A checklist to be completed. I'll have my dad call you, he said, and then he opened the door and walked out. He closed it gently behind him without a sound. I sat there in the silence for what felt like hours. He thinks he escaped a monster. He thinks he's finally free of the crazy woman who screamed and made his life a living hell. He'll tell his parents and his friends, and they'll all nod and say he did the right thing, that he's lucky to be out. They'll see the scratch on his face from the fork, and it will be all the proof they need. He'll never understand that the monster didn't just appear. He created her. He built her piece by piece with every empty apology, every blank stare, every silent retreat. He starved me of connection for so long that I became feral. I was screaming for help, and he just heard noise. I was terrified of him leaving, and my terror is what finally drove him away. I put a hand on my belly and felt a kick. A tiny real flutter of life inside me. I started to cry, but not in the loud, angry way I had before. These were quiet, hot tears for the baby who will never know her father the way I once did. And for the woman who has to figure out how to be a mother all by herself. He didn't just walk out on a monster. He walked out on us.
Story 13.
I know my husband probably told you his side of the story. He's good at that. He can make himself sound like the perfect heartbroken guy who did everything right, and I'm the monster who threw it all away. But you weren't there for the 7 years of silence. You didn't live in my house, which felt more like a museum of a marriage than a home. My entire adult life has been with him. 7 years. And for almost all of that time, I felt completely and utterly alone while lying right next to another person. When we got married, I thought his quiet, steady nature was a strength. I thought it was enough. But it wasn't. The quiet turned into silence, and the steadiness turned into a complete lack of passion for anything, especially for me. He'll probably mention his medical issues. The low T, the ED. He says them like he's reading a diagnosis from a chart. For me, those weren't just medical terms. They were the bars on my cage. I spent my 20s feeling like I was repulsive to my own husband. He thinks a pill fixes the problem. He has no idea. Taking a pill turns intimacy into a science experiment. It becomes this planned sterile event we have to schedule on the calendar. Okay, I took the pill. We have a 4-5 minute window. It's humiliating. I tried to explain it to him so many times. I told him I didn't just want sex. I wanted to be times wanted, asterisk. I wanted him to grab my hand while we were watching TV. I wanted a hug from behind while I was doing dishes. I wanted a real deep kiss that wasn't just a prelude to a medical procedure. I told him straight up, my love language is physical touch. I needed it to feel loved, to feel seen. But all he heard was, I want more sex, which just made him shut down even more because it was something he felt he couldn't give. I felt like a ghost. I was starving to death, and he kept trying to fix it by showing me a picture of a sandwich. When he got COVID, it was awful, but there was a tiny guilty part of me that felt relieved. For 7 weeks, he was quarantined in the house alone. For the first time, the physical space between us finally matched the emotional canyon that had been there for years. I did what a wife is supposed to do. I went to the store every day. I dropped groceries on the front porch. I'd sit in my car in the driveway, and we'd talk on the phone so he could see a human face. He probably saw those 30-minute driveway chats as his only connection to the world. For me, they were a daily chore, a reminder of the man I was responsible for, but no longer felt anything for. Then we had the fight. It was over something so stupid, the electric bill. I was running myself ragged. I was working full-time from home, keeping the house from falling apart, making sure he had food and trying to manage our money because he wasn't getting paid. I saw the electric bill was high, and I mentioned we should be careful. He snapped. He got sarcastic and childish and said, "Fine, I guess I'll just turn everything off and sit in the dark then." That was it. That was the moment something inside me just broke. It wasn't about the bill. It was the complete lack of respect. The total inability to see that I was holding our entire world together while he was locked away. After that phone call, I just stopped. I stopped calling. I stopped the driveway visits. I still dropped off groceries, but I didn't call him to chat. I needed to breathe. I needed air that wasn't filled with his self-pity and my endless disappointment. For 3 weeks, there was silence. In that silence, something else started to grow. A friendship with a guy from work. He's married too, and we'd known each other for years, just as colleagues. With the gyms closed, we started going for walks just to get out of the house and talk. And he listened. He actually times listened asterisk. When I told him how I felt, he didn't try to fix it. He just saw me. He saw how tired and lonely I was. With him, I wasn't a problem that needed a pill. I was just a person, a woman. We ended up hanging out 5 or 6 days a week. It wasn't some evil plan. It was like finding an oxygen tank after holding my breath for 7 years. My life with my husband was empty, and this friend was making it feel full again. When my husband finally tested negative for COVID, I knew I had to end it. It wasn't fair to anyone. He was so excited to be free, and the first thing I did was take that freedom away. He was completely blindsided, which just proves how little attention he was ever paying to me or to us. I told him it was over. I told him he couldn't speak my love language, that years of feeling untouched had killed everything I felt for him. His reaction was almost funny if it wasn't so sad. He immediately went on Audible and downloaded a book about the 5 love languages. A few days later, he asked me to lunch. He sat there all proud of himself and started quizzing me. "Do you even know what my time's love language is?" he asked, like he'd found the magic cheat code to fix everything. Like our entire dead marriage could be resurrected by a 12-chapter self-help book. It was the most insulting thing he could have done. The love wasn't just broken, it was gone. It had turned to dust from years of neglect. Things got messy after that. He kept trying to hang out to be friends to win me back. I felt guilty, so sometimes I'd say yes. It was torture. I cried one night after he said he loved me, and I think he took it as a sign that I wanted him back. I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for the marriage we never had, for the man he should have been. I was crying because I knew I'd hurt him, even though I was just trying to save myself. I thought that was the worst it could get. I thought we would just slowly, painfully drift apart. Then last night my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't answer, but I did. His voice was cold. Colder than I've ever heard it. There was no sadness, no pleading. Just ice. "Hey," he said. "I just got off the phone with a woman named Sarah. She said she's Mark's wife. And she says she has a recording of you two." My blood went cold. For a second I couldn't breathe. The whole world just stopped. Sarah. Mark's wife. A recording. The secret little world I had built for myself, the one place I felt safe and seen, had just been blown open by a woman I'd never even met. I think I just stood there in my kitchen phone, pressed to my ear, not saying anything. "Are you there?" he asked, and the ice in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "I'm here," I managed to say. My own voice sounded strange, like it was coming from far away. "You need to come over. Now." He didn't ask. He told me, then he hung up. The drive to the house was the longest 10 minutes of my life. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the steering wheel. I was running through everything in my head. What was on the recording? Was it real? Mark had told me his wife was suspicious that she was making threats, but I never thought she'd actually do it. I never thought she'd call times him asterisk. I felt sick. Sick with fear, with shame, but also somewhere deep down a tiny flicker of relief. The game was over. The pretending was done. When I walked in, he was standing in the living room, a place we hadn't shared in months. He looked like a stranger. The sadness was gone from his eyes. It had been replaced by a hard, raw anger I'd never seen before. So he said, his arms crossed. "Is it true?" I couldn't lie, not anymore. "We got close," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's a friend." He laughed a short, ugly sound. "A friend? Sarah doesn't seem to think so." 5 or 6 days a week, she said. Going out of state together. She says she has a recording of you two in his truck. What kind of friends are that? It wasn't like that, I said, and even I could hear how weak it sounded. My marriage was over. You weren't there. You haven't been there for years. Oh, I wasn't there, he shot back, finally pacing the room like a caged animal. I was sick. I had COVID. I was locked in this house for 7 weeks. And the one time I get upset, you disappear for 3 weeks and start screwing your coworker. It started before that, and you know it, I yelled, the frustration of 7 years boiling over. This isn't about COVID. This is about a marriage where I felt like a chore, an obligation. I begged you to touch me, to hold my hand, to make me feel like a woman and not just a roommate. You couldn't do it. Mark could. He listened. He saw me. It wasn't about sex, it was about feeling alive. So you cheat, he said, stopping to look right at me. Instead of talking to me, instead of trying, you just go find someone else. You make me the bad guy, tell me I don't speak your love language, all while you're having an affair. That's what he would never understand. I did times try. I tried for years until my voice was raw and my heart was tired. His sudden interest in fixing things, now that he had a villain to blame, was the ultimate insult. The affair wasn't the cause of our divorce. It was a symptom of a marriage that had died of neglect long, long ago. We stood there screaming at each other, saying all the things we should have said for years. He called me a cheater. I called him a stranger. In the end, nothing was solved. I left that house feeling hollowed out like I'd just survived a car crash. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. We separated our bank accounts. I moved the last of my things out of the house. We only talked through text messages, short, cold, and to the point. The warmth was gone. The friendship I had foolishly hoped we could keep was completely burned away. Mark's life was a mess too. His wife had left him. The neat little escape I'd found had turned into a massive, complicated disaster that had ruined 4 lives. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, crushed by the weight of my own guilt. But then I'd remember the silence, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible in my own home, and I knew I couldn't have stayed. On Christmas Day, I felt a strange pull. A sense of duty, maybe, or just sadness for what we'd lost. I drove over to his new apartment with a small gift. It was awkward. He was polite but distant. We made small talk. He noticed the new video game I had sitting in my passenger seat. "New game?" he asked. "Oh yeah," I said, not thinking. Mark got it for me for Christmas. The second the words left my mouth, I wanted to pull them back. I saw the flash of pain in his eyes. It wasn't a competition. It was just my new reality, a reality I was still clumsy with. To break the terrible silence, I said, "Do you want to go for a drive just to talk?" It was a peace offering. A desperate attempt to find some kind of closure that wasn't just screaming and accusations. He looked at me, and for the first time since that horrible phone call, I saw the old him, the sad, gentle man I had married. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I can't. We need to stop this. We need to stop hanging out. I need to be able to move on." And just like that, he let me go. It was the kindest, most honest thing he had done for me in years. He finally drew a line that I was too guilty and confused to draw for myself. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt. It was the closing of a door that needed to be locked. I drove away from his apartment with tears streaming down my face. I wasn't crying because I wanted him back. I was crying because it was finally truly over. He thinks he lost a wife, that I threw our marriage away for someone else. But the truth is, we lost each other years ago in the quiet, empty spaces between us. Mark wasn't the reason my marriage ended. He was just the first person who bothered to notice it was already gone. I don't know if what I did was right or wrong, but I know it was necessary. I had to choose to save myself, even if it meant becoming the villain in his story.